Good evening. Will the members and our guests please take their seats? This meeting will now come to order. As all members have received a copy of the call of tonight's meeting, the reading of the call will be omitted. I'd like to ask Valentina Pareda and Juliana Pugliese to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So I ask all members and guests to please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. As all members have received a copy of the minutes of tonight's meeting, the minutes of our June meeting, the reading of the minutes will be omitted. Are there any suggested corrections to those minutes? Hearing none and absent objection, the minutes as submitted stand adopted. Now you may be wondering who Valentina Pareda and Juliana Pugliese are, along with these other young men and women up front. Well, if you recall, we have had a tradition in recent years of introducing to you the members of the Boys and Girls State Delegation that the American Legion selects and sends off each summer to their respective conventions. And there was a press release summarizing the accomplishments of this group outside. I hope you had a chance to pick that up, but on the way out, if you haven't, you could look at it. In summary, Irv Porter and Livy Florin, Livy being one of our state representatives here in Greenwich, are the organizers, along with the American Legion, of selecting and preparing for these conventions the young men and women who are here before you. And as that press release summarizes, this delegation has achieved the greatest accomplishments in terms of distinctions bestowed upon them by their peers than any delegation sent in the past. So I would like to introduce them individually to you. The members were Jennifer Burke, Jason Finkelstein, Hallie Hindman, Sarika Mather, David McCabe, Scott Out Houston, Valentina Pareda, who was elected by her peers as governor of the state, Juliana Pugliese, who was elected to be one of the state representatives to Girls Nation, Zachary Ruckman, David Saunders, Benjamin Schreff, and Sally Slater. So why don't we give them a round of applause for a wonderful job. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming tonight, and thank you for the wonderful job you did. I also want to say it is interesting to me to see such a wonderful performance by the groups that are sent from Greenwich each year, and so much of that is because of the hard work done by Livy Florin, our state representative, and Irv Porter, and the American Legion, who funds this, which is, quite a substantial cost as well. So all involved deserve to be proud. All right. Jim Lash, our first selectman, is he available? There he is. Has asked to be recognized now.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen of the town meeting. It's my pleasure this evening to introduce to you John Wayne Fox, who might rise for a second. Wayne is the new town attorney for the town of Greenwich. Wayne comes to us with over 30 years of experience representing towns in Connecticut, much of that time as the town attorney for the town of Darien. He spent 24 years in the state legislature, and was, as many of you may know, the co-chair of the committee that reviewed the Rowland affair before he gave up his seat on the legislature. So we're very happy to have him with us, and he will be at your service in the future. Thank you very much.
Randall Huffman, Chair of our Budget Overview Committee.
Good evening. Well, summer's nearly over. Labor Day is behind us, and we've started a new budget cycle. To that end, I wanted to alert you to the notice that came out today that First Selectman's CIP Committee will hold a public hearing next Tuesday, that it's a week from tomorrow, September 27th, in the Cone Room at 7 p.m. I hope all of those who are interested in the CIP process, the CIP budget for the next year and the years to follow, will be in attendance and interested in that event. I know we have a significant agenda tonight, so I will be brief. The BOC is looking at one of the major projects for the town, that is the proposed new safety complex, its impact and its cost. This is a critical project for the future of the town. We definitely need improved police, fire, and emergency response facilities. As the BOC and other committees of the RTM look at this project as a part of the CIP process review as well, we seek your help and input. The schedule for the CIP indicates that this will be one of the major projects in this present budget cycle for funding. This project, as most of you know, has a long history. It's been talked about, certainly as to the police facility, for all the years that I've lived in Greenwich, which is over 20 now. And over the last 10 years, certainly the last 4 First Selectmen's administrations, it has been actively under consideration. Each of the districts this evening received a group of these pages titled RTM Budget Overview Committee Public Safety Complex Survey. It's a 2-sided document. Without taking away too much of your attention from what is going on here, we would urge you to go down those questions, mark them, and we will hope to pick those up before we end the meeting this evening. On the back, if you wish, there's space for additional comments. As you will note, we have not indicated a place for name or district. If you wish to put your name, fine. If you would, we would appreciate you putting down your district so that we can get some tabulation. The goal of this survey is for us to get a better sense, and we hope through the process for you to have a better feeling about your level of present history and understanding and ability at this point to judge the elements of this very complex and very expensive project for the town. So I would urge you to look at the questions. I know many of you in your districts last Wednesday and Thursday got a preview of this, and we have made some revisions, you'll see, to the formatting and to some of the questions, but I think you'll see that it does follow on the approach that we made at that time. We urge you to participate in this, and the BOC will be interested in tabulating and reviewing the results, and we will be interested as well in your input into our process as the BOC continues with its review of this year's CIP process, and particularly this proposed safety complex. Thank you.
Thank you. Vince DeMarco, Chair of the Transportation Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Fellow members, guests, officials, it's appropriate that I'm following Randall's comments regarding the budget cycle that's just beginning. And I'm pleased to be able to do it at the beginning of the meeting. Transportation is not last this time. The RTM Transportation Committee, at its regular meeting on Tuesday, September 13th, hosted the presentation of a proposal that may make it possible for the town to cost-effectively begin operating on alternatives.
Mr. DeMarco?
Yes?
Our technician is asking if you could just push that mic back a little bit.
Sorry, Paul. This proposal is to hopefully cost-effectively begin replacing fleet vehicles that are currently operating on gasoline and diesel fuels with those designed to operate on alternatives and with hybrids. While hybrid vehicles were not available a decade ago, the option of alternative fuels was. Our fleet manager recognized the benefits then and recommended that the town consider using them. About that time, other Connecticut municipalities began to weigh their fuel options, and now an increasing number are receiving state and federal grants for alternative fuels, infrastructure, and hybrids. They've joined many cities and towns across the country, gradually revamping their fleets for better air quality, greater efficiency, and energy security. It is the consensus of the RTM Transportation Committee that the town of Greenwich, when replacing fleet vehicles, should, in addition to cost effectiveness, place a priority on reducing vehicle-related pollution, diversifying its fuel options, and reducing fuel consumption, giving added consideration to vehicles designed to operate on cleaner fuels and those of appropriate type, size, and equipment for their use. The committee sent a memo to the BET urging them to incorporate these priorities into the budget guidelines with regard to fleet vehicle replacements. We know that Betty Link can expertly produce and evaluate additional data we have recommended: tailpipe emissions, fuel efficiency, total cost to operate over life cycle. We'd like to see that these are routinely considered along with fuel type, source, supply, and of course, purchase options. We believe this approach will help clarify objectives that will benefit all of us for years to come. As for that alternative fuels proposal in front of us, the committee has asked that it be updated with current fuel cost data, funding status, and conditions, and supplemented with documentation from those Connecticut municipalities with some experience under their belts. I want to mention that our fleet manager was with us that night to help us with the discussion. We had the president of the organization that did the actual proposal, as well as the manager of the commercial and industrial accounts for Southern Connecticut Gas, and Chris Canavan, who many of you may know operates an alternative fuel station, a natural gas station right here in Greenwich, where our only natural gas powered vehicle has been fueled since we bought it. We'll keep you informed.
Thank you. And as the last item before we get to our call tonight, I want to pick up on a point that I made at our June meeting when we were discussing the motion to refer the proposed charter amendments to our Legislative and Rules Committee. In response to a comment that was made, I pointed out that, in fact, it is up to us as a body to make determinations which include legal issues and legal opinions. And while we turn to our law department for expert advice on that, ultimately we have to weigh the advice we get and make our own decisions. And in particular, there were some comments that had concerned me about the committee to which the issues were referred, our Legislative and Rules Committee. And I didn't make it clear enough in June, and I just want our members to understand what the qualifications are of those who are currently sitting on that important committee. And we have stressed that committee in recent years, asking the districts to send people with either legal training or some background in legal issues, insurance related, et cetera. And of the 12 delegates, I had asked just for a summary of qualifications. Out of the 12 delegates, we have 9 practicing attorneys, or 9 attorneys on that committee. And just quickly to give you a rundown of some of the backgrounds of those attorneys. In no particular order. First, 28 years practicing law here in Greenwich. Second, partner in Greenwich office of a New York firm, 18 years practicing law. Third, editor of the Cornell Law Review, 43 years practicing law, partner in a New York firm. Fourth, Harvard Law School graduate, admitted in California and Connecticut, active in real estate development. Fifth, editor of the University of Pennsylvania Law Review, law clerk to a judge in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, partner with a national law firm, serving in California for 14 years and the New York office for 18 years. Sixth, 30 years practicing law, litigation partner in a national law firm in New York, leading firm regarding insurance coverage issues. Seventh, Fordham Law graduate, admitted in New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. Eighth, 8 years local trust and estates lawyer. And ninth, longtime solo practitioner here in Greenwich. Just to give you an idea, one of the beauties of our system of government is while we have all these various boards and commissions and a large legislative body, I think things work well because we have very talented people in town who are willing to volunteer their services. So I just hope we can have some confidence that the group to which those important issues were referred do have the ability, they will go out and get the expert advice they need, but they will give us their considered opinion on that issue, and then it's up to us to make our determinations. All right, that brings us to the call for tonight's meeting, and I did alert all district and committee chairs that I intended to designate 8 of the 17 items on our agenda for our consent calendar. Item 1 on our call has been withdrawn, and the 8 items, I submitted a list in writing to the district chairs this evening. Because we will not get any committee reports or hear any debate on items on our consent calendar, I will briefly summarize what these items are about. The first item that I will place on the consent calendar is item 6, which is a nomination of Donald Heller to serve as an alternate member of the Planning and Zoning Commission with a term expiring March 31, 2008. Item 7 is a nomination of Christopher Ann Thurlow to be a member of the Nathaniel Witherell Board with a term expiring March 31, 2008. Item 8 is the approval of a name change, changing the name of Wellington Street to Wellington Place. Item 10 is the nomination of Patricia Kirkpatrick to be an alternate member of the Planning and Zoning Board of Appeals with a term expiring March 31, 2009. Item 11 is a nomination of Ellen Avellino to be an alternate member of the Planning and Zoning Commission with a term expiring March 31, 2008. Item 13 is the approval of the release of an easement on a portion of Hooker Lane abutting number 30 Hooker Lane, and approving the property to be quitclaimed, that particular easement to be quitclaimed to the abutting property owners. Item 14 is the acceptance of a gift of a tow vehicle from the Connecticut Department of Public Safety. And the final item that I am recommending be put on the consent calendar is item 16, which is the appropriation of $68,000 from the contingency fund to be used to perform property audits. Audits of personal property, not real property. So, pursuant to our rules, I have now designated items 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 13, 14, and 16 to be placed on the consent calendar. Our rules provide that if there is an objection supported by 20 or more members, though any such item to which there is an objection will be taken off the consent calendar. Are there any objections to those items being placed on our consent calendar? Hearing none, and absent objection, those are the items on our consent calendar. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Consent calendar, items 6 through 8, 10, 11, 13, 14, and 16, and please proceed to poll your delegation. That now leaves for us to take up items 2, 3, 4, 5, 9, 12, 15, and 17. Now, one of the reports that I had originally got had two districts asking that item 15 be considered separately. I'm now informed that they will consent to those being combined, put on the combined calendar. So items 12 and 15 can be combined for voting purposes, which would leave items 2, 3, 4, 5, 9, and 17 to be taken up separately. All right. Now, this is, given the interest in the dog park proposal, which is item 17 on our call, there has been discussion among the committee chairs and the district chairs and myself regarding how we will structure our business tonight. And my concern always, because we have so many people here for item 17, it is likely that unless there are limits put on the overall time for debate, that could take a couple hours or so, which, if we were to take that up first, could put other important business late into the night when our attendance would be different than if we took that business up in the beginning. So we have reached a compromise to try and get to item 17 as soon as possible. I'm going to recognize Franklin Bloomer shortly, and he will offer a motion to suspend the rules to move items 2 and 3, which are likely the only other ones that might involve significant discussion, to the end of our agenda. And that would leave item 17 really as the first item of any significant debate that we would take up, and we would reach that relatively shortly. So that is the game plan for tonight. Mr. Bloomer, I recognize you to make a motion to suspend the rules.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members of town meeting, the resolution is as follows. Actually, I have a second resolution regarding limits on time of speakers to follow this if this is adopted. But the resolution that I'd like to offer now is as follows. Resolved that this meeting defer the rules to take up items 2 and 3 after item 17.
All right. Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded to suspend the rules to take up items 2 and 3 out of order, placing them at the end of our agenda so that they would come after item 17. And absent any special rule, we take remaining items up in the order in which they appear on our agenda. The motion to suspend the rules is not debatable, and it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. So if you are in favor of putting items 2 and 3, which are 2 appointments, then you should vote in favor of this motion to suspend the rules. If you want to keep the agenda as it currently appears, you should vote against this. All those in favor of the motion to suspend the rules to take items 2 and 3 at the end of our meeting, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried. Why don't we now take up, this is a motion to limit debate just on item 17, is that correct? All right, we can take that up at this time. Mr. Bloomer?
The motion is as follows, very similar to the motions we've adopted in the past. Resolved that speakers on item 17 be limited to 3 minutes apiece, except for the proponent and the principal opponent, the latter to be designated by the moderator, each of whom shall be limited to 10 minutes.
All right. Let me just ask you this, Mr. Bloomer. Our typical motion to limit debate in the past has been to limit speakers to 3 minutes per motion if a motion is made in debating the item. Is that what you
I accept that change. Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
So the proposed motion is on item 17 only to limit all speakers to 3 minutes per motion, with the exception that the proponent and principal opponent would have up to 10 minutes to speak. Now, the principal opponent would be Mr. Lash on this. Once again, a motion to limit debate, like the motion to suspend the rules, is not debatable, and it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of limiting speakers to 3 minutes per motion on item 17, with the exceptions as noted, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried. Now, with respect to item 17, there are sign-up sheets that were placed on the table as you walked into the auditorium, and there are sign-up sheets at the front of the auditorium. So if you are interested in speaking and have not yet signed up, please do so, because I expect that we will be reaching item 17 shortly. All right. I indicated items 12 and 15 could be combined based on the reports of the districts and committees that reviewed these items. So is there a motion to suspend the rules to combine items 12 and 15 for voting purposes? It has been moved and seconded to suspend the rules to combine items 12 and 15 for voting purposes. The motion to suspend the rules is not debatable. It requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of combining items 12 and 15 for voting purposes, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion is carried. Item 12, Item 4, we're going to take this up in order. Item 4 now comes before us. We'll consider 4, 5, and 9 separately, then 12 and 15 will be combined, and then item 17, then 2 and 3. So item 4 is a motion to appoint Matthew Popp. It was postponed to this meeting from our June meeting, so it is currently before us. May we have the reports of the committees that considered item 4? We're going to start with appointments, and it's Chair Colleen Jenkins.
On Monday, today, at 7:45, the Appointments Committee met in the lobby at Central Middle School. The item of business was for the Appointments Committee to vote on the postponement of the nomination of Matthew Popp to the October call. The vote was 10-1-0. The explanation is the chair of the Appointments Committee, by oversight, neglected to schedule an interview with the nominee in a timely fashion. My mistake in no way reflects on the merits of the nominee. The effect of this postponement is that Matthew Popp continues to serve on the Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Agency until replaced.
Thank you. Franklin Bloomer with the report of the Land Use Committee.
The Land Use Committee met with Mr. Popp last Monday evening. I'm going to give our vote, and I'm going to step down and allow the Appointments Committee motion to be voted upon. If the Appointments Committee motion is not adopted, then I will give a fuller report, with your permission, Mr. Moderator. Our vote was 4 in favor, 4 opposed, no abstentions, with 4 districts absent. So the committee was evenly divided on this item. I will give a fuller report if the motion to postpone is not carried.
Thank you. Ms. Jenkins?
The Appointments Committee moves to postpone Matthew Popp's nomination to the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency until October 2005.
Because that motion is offered on behalf of one of our committees, it does not require a second. Discussion on the motion to postpone item 4 to our October meeting. All right. Since this is a procedural matter, I will call for a voice vote. All those in favor of postponing item 4 to our October meeting, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. That motion is carried. Item 4 will come back to us in October. Item 5 now comes before us. Al Caba, Director of Labor Relations.
Mr. Moderator, members RTM, good evening. Item number 5, resolved that the sum of $101,405 for the fiscal year 2005-2006 be and the same is hereby appropriated to carry out the terms of the negotiated 4-year collective bargaining agreement between the Town of Greenwich and Local 456 International Brotherhood of Teamsters. Further resolved that the representative town meeting of the Town of Greenwich hereby approves such provisions of the agreement, if any, which may be in conflict with any charter provision, special act, ordinance, rule, or regulation of the Town of Greenwich within the meaning of Connecticut General Statutes, Section 7474.
Thank you. Will member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 5 has been moved and seconded. Joan Caldwell, Chair of our Labor Contracts Committee.
Mr. Moderator, members of town meeting. The proposed settlement that appeared, the proposed settlement number 15 or number 17 tonight was the same one that was on the June call, and we had expected to deal with it that night. But as you may recall, it was announced that the agreement had not been ratified by the union, and so therefore it was withdrawn. The parties, meaning the town and the union, have negotiated further. There have been some minor tweaks in the agreement as it appeared last June, and the agreement has now been ratified by the union, and it is therefore correctly before us. Some of the changes that were made were a modification of the work week, a clearer specification of the work week for the town's park employees, and that was something that was a real issue in the first go-around. We've resolved it by just leaving it alone. So once that was done, we were able to get ratification. This is a 4-year agreement with Local 456, representing approximately 440 carpenters, laborers, mechanics, custodians, gardeners, sewer workers, and others. The first year of the contract is retroactive to July 2004 and calls for a general wage increase of 3%. The increases for each of the remaining 3 years of the contract is 3.25%. That is consistent with what the town has been giving other employee groups in town. I should remind you that there are no increments paid to the Teamsters. That's the one contract where there are only 2 rates of pay. There's a beginning rate, which is good for 6 months, and then after that the employee goes to the full published figure, and any increase that he or she receives is by virtue of collective bargaining and not because there's an incremental step. In looking over the information that Mr. Cava provided us last June for the settlement that did not get ratified, and the information that he provided relative to this agreement, it looks to me like the difference, the bottom line difference between the 2 agreements is only $1,300. And that can be accounted for by the fact that because this contract is being agreed to in September, the employees in it will not go into the town's PPO insurance program until next January. We do not have the savings that we would have had they come in the past July 1st. Now, there are 2 major provisions in this agreement that are substantial. One is the health insurance, which I just mentioned, and the other is a change in the pension program. With regard to the health insurance, the agreement provides that all present Teamsters employees will be covered by a point-of-service health insurance and a 3-tier pharmacy plan. New hires, however, will have a choice of the Health Net points of service or the health management plan or a health savings account, which is very new. We've been reading about it in the paper. It's kind of like a 401k, but for health. Whichever best suits their individual needs. All three options are less a costly way of providing the needed insurance that our employees have. In the area of pension, this agreement provides for the town to eliminate both the defined benefit retirement plan and the 401k for new employees, and to offer in their place a defined contribution pension plan. This is the second contract to do so as the town moves to phase out the old retirement system as we knew it and phase in a new DC plan or defined contribution plan for future employees. Actually, there are 2 new hires right now in the defined contribution plan, with another 12 openings that we expect will be filled by the first of the year. If you add the total number of employees in the Teamsters contract, which is 440, with those of GMEA, that's the group you approved last July, or last June, we have almost 900 of the town's 1,200 employees now in the defined contribution plan. And I should correct that. It's not town employees, it's town positions. It's when the position came free or comes free, the new hire comes into this. If the employee is in the job now and was in the job on June 30th, he stays in the old plan. Present employees, those who were here on June 30th, continue in the defined benefit plan as before, but with the added incentive of an annual COLA for those that are at age 65. The COLA will be 100% of CPI up to 3%. Now, anyone in this group who elected to remain to retire on July 1st or after will get the COLA. As of today, the number of people who retired from the town of Greenwich in the Teamster and in GMEA and thus are retired and eligible for the annual COLA are 9. 5 Teamsters, 4 GMEA. While the Labor Contracts Committee met to discuss the contract in total, it paid particular attention to Nathaniel Witherell employees because the future of that facility is so uncertain, and in a sense I think they feel that their future is uncertain. The town in its negotiations felt it was better to give employees in this facility a lump sum payment up front rather than to take the money and spread it out through the year by raising their per hour or their base rate increase. In this way, it will not have any effect, adverse or otherwise, on the town's business plan or the Nathaniel Witherell business plan when it comes, and we're expecting it shortly. Turnover in this facility is very low among the workers, and for that reason, the upfront payment we didn't feel was a risk. Payment of the lump sum is not retroactive. You had to be an employee of the town as of July 1st in order to get it. You can't come in next month and expect to get it. In order to receive it, an employee must be an employee at the beginning of the retirement of his year. On balance, the committee felt this was a good contract. We recommended for your approval. Our vote was 5 in favor, none opposed.
Thank you. Josh Brown, Chair of our Finance Committee.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members and guests, the Finance Committee met last Monday with 10 districts present and voting. We're missing 4 and 9. We also had Mr. Cava helping us on this item, and Ms. Caldwell from Labor Contracts participated in some of our discussions. I've been checking off most of what we had covered was consistent with what Joan had discussed. There are some additional items. As she was mentioning Nathaniel Witherell, there were some adjustments to the item that was brought to us in June that recognized that some of the employees needed to keep pace with the current market salary conditions. So rather than giving them lump sum payments, they're actually getting annual increases in their base rates so that they're able to keep pace with the market conditions. And those were in the nursing areas. I think it was LPNs and the maintenance mechanics area. Besides that, everything was very much in line with what Ms. Caldwell reported. The appropriation that's before us is for the 06 fiscal year. The costs that are being needed for the '05 fiscal year were covered by accruals of the appropriations that had been previously made. Our vote was 10 in favor, 0 opposed, and 0 abstaining in favor. Thank you.
And I'd like to welcome and congratulate Greg Fruman, who is the new chair of our Town Services Committee.
Hi. And I'll be very brief. Town Services met on this item on Tuesday, September 13th. All 12 districts were represented. We voted 12-0-0 in favor of it. And Mr. Brown and Joan Caldwell covered everything. So thank you.
That's a Dudakis special right there. And I understand the Special Committee on Nathaniel Witherell considered this, and Mr. DeCaro, you're going to give that report?
Yes, briefly, we met this evening with the assistance of Mr. Cava, just to discuss how it affected Nathaniel Witherell. There were 3 questions brought to our attention by an important member of the RTM that we reviewed. They related to these lump sum payments. As was explained, they are earned on the first paycheck of the forthcoming year. It is virtually impossible, because of the way it negotiates, that any particular position would be getting 2 of those payments over the year if someone left and someone new came in. And any employees that have retired prior to our approval of the, not retired, any employees who have quit or left and been terminated are not eligible for it. The committee voted 7 in favor, none opposed, to recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on item 5. Mr. Boutel, District 8. The question concerns the appropriation. For what fiscal year is that appropriation?
Mr. Moderator, the fiscal year is the '05-06. It spans the last half of the '05 year and the beginning of the '06 calendar years.
As it appears on the call. Thank you. Further discussion on item 5. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item number 5, and proceed to poll your delegation. Item 9 now comes before us. Ed Gomo, Town Administrator.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, item number 9. Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a member of the Commission on Aging for a term expiring March 31st, 2008. Phyllis Pratt.
Thank you. Will member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 9 has been moved and seconded. Colleen Jenkins. No. We will go with Robert Richardson, Chair of our Health and Human Services Committee.
Mr. Moderator, thank you. Ms. Pratt had an important prior commitment, which she could not change, on September 13th that precluded her meeting with our committee. I spoke with her by phone, and she will be able to meet with us for the October meetings. Accordingly, Mr. Moderator, on behalf of the committee, I move that the nomination of Ms. Phyllis Pratt for a 3-year term on the Commission on Aging be postponed until the October meeting. That motion is made on behalf of the committee.
Thank you. Ms. Jenkins, with the Appointments Committee report.
The Appointments Committee interviewed Phyllis Pratt for the Commission on Aging. Our vote was 11-0-0 with District 12 absent. Because there's a motion to postpone her vote, I'll save the report for the next meeting.
All right, Mr. Richardson, would you like to make that motion now? You can make it from... All right. It has been moved on behalf of our Health and Human Services Committee to postpone item 9 to our October meeting. Discussion on the motion to postpone. Once again, I will call for a voice vote, this being a procedural issue. All those in favor of postponing item 9 to our October meeting, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? That motion is carried. Item 9 will return in October. Item 12 now comes before us, the first of the two combined items. Ed Gomo, Town Administrator.
Mr. Moderator, members of the town meeting, item number 12, we have a substitute resolution. Resolved that the sum of $25,000 be and the same is hereby appropriated to be added to, and this is one of the changes, the leased railroad fund, account number 317 rather than 345-59600-24099, known as the Old Greenwich Riverside Railroad Station Rehabilitation. Said funds are received from the State of Connecticut Department of Transportation Railroad Fund and administered by the town for terms of an existing lease.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the substitute resolution? The substitute resolution on item 12 has been moved and seconded. Mr. Kavee with the report of our Public Works Committee.
Uh, 11 districts were represented and voted, and District 2 was absent. The vote was 11 in favor, none opposed, with no abstentions. All of the $674,808 for these projects have already been expensed, including the $25,000 to be appropriated by item 12 on this RTM call, and that $25,000 is subject to the written approval of the State of Connecticut Department of Transportation. The current $25,000 represents only a small portion of the cost overrun from the originally approved estimates for the Old Greenwich Railroad Station rehabilitation. The first component of the overrun was generated by an original high bid. This bid consumed the entire authorized DOT $500,000 funds, excepting a $45,895 COSCOB re-roof project, and it eliminated the large project to rehabilitate the Riverside Railroad Station. Then came a $150,000 interim funding to support the unforeseen structural modifications to the Old Greenwich Railroad Station. Finally, we are now funding the $25,000 accounting emission for the Old Greenwich Railroad Station architectural design. The Riverside Railroad Station rehabilitation remains unfunded. Somehow we lose sight that the funds for these projects largely originate from the pockets of Greenwich citizens and indirectly come from the state DOT. They come from parking fees, which the state DOT then approves for us to spend for railroad-related projects and specific projects. With hindsight, a complete, elegant replacement for a building the size of the Old Greenwich Railroad Station could have been possible for the $630,000 which has been expensed.
Thank you. Vince DeMarco with the report of our Transportation Committee.
Thank you, Mr. McCavee, for doing my job. The Transportation Committee also took this up, but I had reported all of Bob's information from the night before. There was no arguments. I can't give you any more information than he did. The vote was 9-0-0 with districts 8, 10, and 12 absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 12. Item 15, a combined item with 12, now comes before us. Dr. Susan Wallerstein of the Greenwich Public Schools.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM. This is a substitute resolution. Resolved that the Town of Greenwich accept the donation of playground equipment from the Julian Curtis School PTA, consistent with the terms and conditions outlined in the Memorandum of Understanding.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the substitute resolution? The substitute resolution on item 15 has been moved and seconded. Mr. Brady with the report of our Education Committee.
Good evening, members, Mr. Moderator, guests. The Education Committee met last Monday night to consider this item. We had the assistance of Dr. Wallerstein. 10 districts were present. Districts 6 and 12 were unrepresented. Our vote was 10 in favor, none opposed, and no abstentions. The gift is a gift of playground equipment, which will be purchased by the Julian Curtis PTA. The Memorandum of Understanding, which is incorporated by reference, provides that the PTA will raise the money, will pay for the equipment within 10 days of the presentment of an invoice, and that the project will be entirely managed by the Parks and Recreation Department. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on item 15. Barbara Hinman, District 12.
Hi, I'm Barbara Hinman, District 12. This is obviously not a controversial gift, as reflected in the fact that it has been included as a combined item. Unlike the dog park issue, this item will not unleash strong emotions. Julian Curtis needs the playground upgrade and should have it. However, I have two philosophical problems with the acceptance of the gift. First, it is another example of a blanket waiver of the gift cap in the BOE gift policy. And second, this item is in the current capital budget. If the $85,000 amount budgeted is not enough to do the job properly, the town should appropriate the additional money to finish the job. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on item 15? Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, combined items 12 and 15, and proceed to poll your delegation. The next item that we come to is item 17, the dog park. So if anyone has not yet signed up who is interested in speaking, please come forward. There are some sheets here. And could someone please check and see if there are any further lists? Someone did bring me some of the lists, but that's it? No other lists out there? All right. So there are some lists up here. I do have the results of the vote on the consent calendar items. Those items were items 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 13, 14, and 16. Those in favor, 146. Opposed, 0. Abstaining, 0. The consent calendar items have carried. All right. We are now taking up item 17, the dog park issue. Let me just say, first I'll remind you that there is a limit in effect on speakers. That does not include committee reports. The proponent, who will be Mr. Relier, and the principal opponent, who is our first selectman, will each have 10 minutes to speak. All other speakers 3 minutes per motion. Keep in mind, the way this resolution has come before us, it is worded such that ultimately, if you are in favor of allowing a dog park to be placed at the Grass Island location, and therefore approving the municipal improvement application for that property, you will have to vote against item 17. If you are against the dog park being placed at the Grass Island location, meaning you want to reject the municipal improvement application, you should vote in favor of item 17. Unfortunately, the wording has sort of reversed proponent of dog park and opponent of dog park. The proponent of the resolution is an opponent of the dog park at Grass Island. So just so we keep that clear as we're discussing it, and of course when we're voting I'll go through that again. So, Mr. Relier, you being the proponent, you are the referring property owner. You may present the motion, the resolution.
Mr. Moderator, members of the town meeting, thank you for letting us come before you to ask you to...
I'm sorry, I was not clear. The way we will proceed is all I need you to do is present the resolution. You can summarize it, you could read it if you like. Then a member will move it and second it, and we will get committee reports, and then we will begin debate. So I'm not asking you for your 10-minute presentation or up to 10-minute presentation. Just present it to us. We'll procedurally get it before us and get our committee reports on it. I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. Resolved that the RTM has considered the referral filed under Section 100 of the Town Charter by William A. Relier, a person owning property within the town on behalf of himself and 88 other persons owning property within the town, and that, accordingly, the RTM hereby resolves to reject the action of the Greenwich Planning and Zoning Commission approving and granting the application for municipal improvement number 540, and, as applicable, the application for final coastal site plan number 2654 and/or number 2654-C, submitted by Eric V.P. Brower, authorized agent for and on behalf of the Town of Greenwich, record owner for construction of 3/4 of an acre fenced area for canine recreation at Grass Island with improvements, which decision was published in the Greenwich Time, a newspaper of general circulation in the Town of Greenwich, on Tuesday, August 2nd, 2005.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 17 has been moved and seconded. May we have the reports of the committees that considered this, beginning with our Health and Human Services Committee report given by Mr. Richardson, its chair.
Mr. Moderator, thank you very much. In reviewing this item, the Health and Human Services Committee benefited by the views of Mr. Relier, whom you've just met, who lives on Shore Road and is the principal petitioner against P&Z's decision authorizing the dog park, and also Mrs. Suzanne Geis-Robbins, also of Shore Road. I might say both of them made excellent presentations. Representing the town's position in favor of the dog park were Mr. Edward B. Gomo, Town Administrator, Ms. Denise Savageau, Conservation Director, and Ms. Caroline Calderon-Baisley, Director of Health. There was also a representative of the Dog Owners of Greenwich group. Petitioners stressed that they were not opposed to dogs, but rather that Grass Island, which abuts their neighborhood, is a park and a conservation area, the use of which is restrictive to, quote, passive, unquote, use, which arguably does not include a facility which has to be fenced in, locked during hours of non-use, subject to its own set of rules, and the supervision of Parks and Recreation personnel. They also stressed that the proposed use contravenes a master plan approved by the RTM in 1990, a court settlement approved in 1976, and the original deed of gift, which goes back to the beginning of the century. Moreover, the proposal sets a bad precedent for the use of the town's other parks, particularly for Bruce Park, where a dog pound is now improperly located. Town officials, on the other hand, stress that the proposal has been vetted and approved by 5 competent town bodies, starting with the Board of Selectmen, subject to various restrictions, and that a dog park within a park is arguably a passive use. They also stress that the conditions imposed on the town call for review of the matter at the end of 1 year. Mr. Gomo also advised the committee that 12 of the people who are parties to the litigation of the 1975-76 case have filed a lawsuit in the Superior Court in Stamford against the town, alleging contempt of the settlement by virtue of having the proposal approved by P&Z. Mr. Gomo noted that the town attorney has reviewed the proposal and thinks that the town is in compliance. Mr. Fox subsequently called me to state his view that the proposed dog park is a passive park use. He indicated, however, that he would prefer not to have to put his opinion in writing for the benefit of this body at this juncture in view of the pending litigation, because his customary practice would be to offer various citations to substantiate his position, and that would be disadvantageous at this point to the town. After hearing the competing views, the committee voted 3 in favor of the petitioners and 9 against. Those in favor were Districts 4, 9, and 12. In addition to accepting the views of the proponents of the petition, the delegate from District 9 expressed concern about the effects of the dog park on the ecostructure and the wildlife in the area. The delegate from District 12 expressed particular concern about endangering adjacent marsh grass areas that constitute part of the Grass Island Park. The majority felt that the project has been carefully considered by the land use agencies and the Board of Health, and I might add, carefully conditioned. In addition, those who had walked the property felt that the area concern is well screened from the neighbors, and that the site itself can hardly be considered to be either inviting or attractive in the ordinary sense of park use. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Franklin Bloomer with the report of our Land Use Committee.
The Land Use Committee met on this item last Monday evening. The item, as has been said, is an appeal by property owners from action by the Planning and Zoning Commission granting municipal improvement status to the creation of the dog park, which would be on a 3-quarter-acre site immediately adjacent to the town's sewage treatment plant on Grass Island. The effect of approval of this resolution would be to withdraw or terminate the municipal improvement status, which has been granted by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and therefore to kill the dog park. The park would be, if approved, if the municipal improvement status remains in effect after tonight, there would be a review in 1 year, as was stated by Mr. Richardson, by all of the concerned town agencies. At our meeting, we had Mr. Relier speak for the petitioners. Mr. Brower was present for as the principal spokesman for the dog park. We also had Joe Siciliano, Director of Parks and Rec, Ed Gomo, Town Administrator, Denise Savageau, Conservation Director, Sylvester Pecora, the Friends of Grass Island, was also present, and we had a large number of other neighbors and interested persons, both for and against the dog park. Mr. Richardson has summarized the various arguments very well. As stated in the explanos, the petitioner's argument really is not an argument against a dog park, but an argument that the dog park at Grass Island would violate the original deed, which goes back to 1916. That was the deed pursuant to which the town obtained the land, to a court injunction that was issued in the 1970s, to a management plan that was developed in 1975, to the Grass Island Master Plan and the town's plan of conservation and development, all of which limit use of the park to passive and water-dependent uses, except for the possible expansion of the sewage treatment plant. The 1916 deed also said that the land would not be so used as to become a nuisance to the surrounding residential property, and those who were present at our meeting and who were occupants of residential property in the surrounding area felt that it would be a nuisance. Concerns were also raised about the adequacy of parking, about the adequacy of supervision, about noise, and about liability to the town. The proponents argued that the dog park would be a passive use within the meaning of the documents cited by the petitioners, and that in any event, the RTM is not the appropriate body to resolve that legal issue. This issue or related issues have been raised in the litigation that has been commenced, to which Mr. Richardson referred. The proponents did note that this is a proposal that has been in the making for 5 years and has been passed on by the Board of Parks and Rec, by the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Health, the Conservation Commission, and finally, the Planning and Zoning Commission by its grant of municipal improvement status. With dogs no longer permitted to run off leash in many areas of the town, the argument was that the dog park has broad support among dog owners. Our vote was 5 in favor of the resolution and therefore against the dog park, 1 vote against the resolution with 2 abstentions. Districts 6, with 2 abstentions. Districts 6, 9, 10, and 12 were absent. 4 absences. Those abstaining were districts 1 and 3. The 1 no vote was District 5, which is my district. I believe the dog park would not violate the prohibition on non-passive uses, that the desirability of a dog park has been demonstrated, and that Grass Island would be a good place to give the idea a 1-year trial. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Sada-Khan with the report of our Parks and Recreation Committee.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, fellow RTM members and guests. The Parks and Rec Committee met last Tuesday night with all districts present. We took up item 17 on the call with the assistance of the many guests we had. Joe Siciliano, Director of Parks and Rec, and Denise Savageau, Director of the Conservation Commission, presented the background information surrounding the issue of the proposed dog park at Grass Island. While the resolution on the call is a specific motion to reject the action of the Greenwich Planning and Zoning Commission approving and granting the application for municipal improvement, it seemed essential that everyone be on the same page with the facts surrounding the motion. Joe Siciliano reviewed with a map the area to be used for the dog park, and Denise Savageau explained with her handout that her commission was comfortable approving the dog park on the town-owned property of approximately 27 7/10 acres located at Grass Island. It was noted that the actual configuration of the Grass Island lands has actually changed over the years gradually, and it no longer resembles the original tract of land that was deeded in 1916. We then reviewed the facts that were used by the various agencies to reach their decisions. Of the 27 7/10 acres, 20 acres is managed by the Department of Parks and Rec, and 7.5 acres is managed by the Department of Public Works and serves as a site for our municipal wastewater facility. The Parks and Rec Department currently uses the area for a public marina and boat launch, leased to a yacht club, and a managed conservation area. The managed conservation area is 11.2 acres. The proposed dog park encompasses approximately 7.5 acres on Grass Island, adjacent to and north of the sewage treatment plant, including 2/10 acres of the managed conservation area. The plan calls for utilizing the existing chain link fence for the southern boundary and for installing similar fencing to form a rectangular-shaped fenced area for the dog park. The actual land area proposed for the dog park wouldn't be affected, no grading, earth removal, or tree removal, or anything like that. A seasonal water supply would be installed with underground pipes, with gravel or crushed stone for the water area. Other concerns were also looked at. Dog waste users will be required to clean up. Runoff to the sound will be reduced by maintaining good grass cover and vegetation buffer on the east side of the proposed dog park. The soil will be checked to maintain fertility and lime will be applied to maintain pH so that little or no impact will take place on the land, the grass. Maintenance of ground cover, Parks and Rec proposes to mow the site at a level between 3 to 6 inches so that good cover will be allowed and will be, which would be essential also for proper cleanup. The impact of the dog park on the managed conservation area and wildlife. People and dogs already use this area. Impact on wildlife is minimal, as it's only 3/4 of an acre of the 27-acre site. The berm adjacent to the sewage treatment plant, where the site is well away from tidal wetlands on the west side of the park, which is used by shorebirds. There is also existing and adequate parking. As we know, after selecting Grass Island for the proposed dog park, the Department of Parks and Rec requested approval through the town process. The following town agencies approved the proposal: the Board of Parks and Recreation, the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Health, the Conservation Commission, and the Planning and Zoning Commission. As you have read in the explanatories from the first Selectman, Mr. Lash, in the case of Planning and Zoning, the town was required to notify all of the adjoining neighbors of the date and time of the Planning and Zoning meeting prior to the meeting being held, and they did so. We then turn to our attention to the proponents of the actual resolution in item 17. With us were Mr. Relier of the Greenwich Harbor Neighborhood Association, as well as Josephine Conboy from Save Our Shores. and Sylvester Pecora, Chair of Friends of Grass Island. They all spoke in favor of the resolution. They set forth very clearly and strongly their logic for reasons that they are against constructing the dog park in Grass Island. They also indicated the petitions that they had filed previously, one on August 25th with 88 signatures, and before that on July 26th with 130 signatures of people who were objected to the dog park on Grass Island. This was filed with Planning and Zoning with the Commission. Their objections to the dog park, or the municipal improvement, if you're going by the resolution, are based on this information. Grass Island has a well-documented history on its permitted use, and the dog park isn't one of them. Grass Island should be used in a manner not offensive to any neighbors. As a result of the 1970 injunctions and the agreement with the neighbors in 1975, the town established the managed conservation area in Grass Island. In 1990, the Planning and Zoning Commission required that these restrictions and protections be part of the Grass Island Master Plan, and as a condition of the municipal improvement for the expansion of the sewage plant in 1990. The Grass Island Master Plan designated the conservation area for permanent protection at Passive Park, except for the expansion of the sewage plant, and set specific prohibitions against any use of Grass Island other than managed conservation area, a passive park, water-dependent uses, and the sewage treatment plant. The dog park is in the Grass Island Managed Conservation Area. Albeit it's 2/10 of an acre. Dogs are not allowed unleashed in the conservation area, and even leashed dogs are seldom in the managed conservation area. There is also a controversy with the neighbors about, quote, the meadow. These groups maintain that only recently was the lawn mowed, which creates this meadow. Another point of controversy is the definition of passive. A dog park for unleashed dogs is not passive use, nor is it water dependent. Furthermore, does fencing off an area for exclusive use by a particular group conflict with the concept of a passive park available for all town residents? They claim that putting a dog park in Grass Island sets a bad precedent for all town parkland. Even though this is only a one-year trial period, unleashed dogs in passive areas might continue as a precedent to the detriment of other parks in our town. They claim the issues of health and safety have not been resolved. Unleashed dogs could affect wildlife, environment, and public safety and health with contaminants to the soil, overcrowding the 30 parking spaces that are already shared with boat owners, fishermen, and others who visit Grass Island. They even claim that perhaps dogs will roam along Shore Road if they get loose. Who will monitor and enforce the rules? Clear plans are not available, and when it comes the time after 1 year to review the dog park, who is it appropriate to have review it? The Parks and Rec, which is the proponent of it? What is the liability to the town? Without someone on site full-time, will there be liability issues involved? Also of great concern, this group felt that the process for the approval of this was flawed. They claimed that they weren't notified until they read about it in the newspaper. The selectmen only met with the neighbors after the site location had been approved. They claimed that Planning and Zoning overturned the plan of conservation, the deed-restricted open space plan, and the Grass Island Master Plan by determining that a dog park is the proper use for a waterfront passive use park. On this basis, these parties have requested that the RTM continue the protections established for Grass Island and overturn the dog park municipal improvement. Also speaking in opposition to this municipal improvement was Suzanne Roberts, who had served on the Conservation Commission in the 90s for 10 years, when the master plan was written for Grass Island. She stressed that this appeal is about protecting Grass Island from use not permitted since 1916 in its original deed, and that the issue is not about the dog park, but about honoring commitments at Grass Island and other town parks. Another speaker, Mark Schroeder, faulted Planning and Zoning for overturning past judgments and questioned their ability to determine that a dog park is a passive use of a park. Lastly, Helen Fleischman spoke on behalf of the dog park advocates. She covered most information we already had, but focused on dog parks that were in other communities that had been successful and that were considered to be enhancements to other communities. Greenwich has been looking for over 5 years to find an area for dogs to socialize and run off leash. She feels that dog owners are very law-abiding and would reduce the need for animal control officers. As another point, she noted there are 17 dog parks in Connecticut and over 600 in the United States. Our committee asked questions throughout all of these presentations and then voted on the resolution. A variety of opinions evolved regarding the resolution. The vote was taken at 4-8-0. The 4 districts voting for the resolution were District 2, 4, 5, and 6. The reasons for these 4 votes were all similar. If the dog park goes through, does it set a precedent for what could happen in other parks? That the deed made it clear that Grass Island uses were what Grass Island uses were to be, and that there is a managed conservation area in the proposed area of the dog park, and that the definition of passive is being altered, and finally, that the process was heavy-handed with the neighbors and that they felt they had not been informed of the process properly. Those against, that was the 8 votes, felt that the process had been fair, that it was unnecessary to question the decisions, actions, and recommendations of the involved agencies, that these groups are opposed to any dog park, that parking is not an issue as it is an underused area, and this is a trial for 1 year for which the dog park advocates have waited many, many years to see. Thank you.
All right. We have now reached the discussion on this item, but before beginning, I want to read the votes that on items 5 and the combined items 12 and 15. Item 5 was the Teamsters contract. Those in favor, 161. Opposed, 2. Abstaining, 2. That item has carried. Items 12 and 15. 12 was the appropriation for the Old Greenwich Railroad Station. 15, the acceptance of the playground at Julian Curtis. Those in favor, 164. Opposed, 2. Abstaining, 0. Those items have carried. All right. Just a word about discussion on item 17. I have a total of 10 speakers signed up to support the dog park at Grass Island and 12 speakers against the dog park at Grass Island. We will, and just keep in mind, I would encourage our speakers, if points have been made by a preceding speaker, no need to repeat endlessly. You can simply adopt the comments of a prior speaker. I think that might be appreciated. And keep in mind there is a 3-minute limit. We will begin with the principal proponent, Mr. Relier. You have 10 minutes, to be followed by Mr. Lash. And as we get into the speaker list, I would ask the following speaker to please come forward and sit in the chairs, one of the chairs at the front, so we don't have to wait for a parade of speakers walking down. Mr. Relier.
Mr. Moderator, members of the town meeting, I'm Bill Relier. I live on Shore Road and am president of the Greenwich Harbor Neighborhood Association. And I'd like to thank you for letting us come before you to ask you to overturn municipal improvement of a dog park on Grass Island. First, I would like to say that we are not against dogs. Most of us are or have been dog owners and have spent many happy hours with our dogs in various town parks. The issue relating to a dog park on Grass Island is the violation of established protections for Grass Island, and by extension, other waterfront and passive use parks in town, such as Byram, Bruce, Binney, and Todd's Point, as well as other parks with dedicated open spaces. As a number of people summarized very well, many protections for the managed conservation and park areas of Grass Island have been built up over the years. They include the restrictions in the Oliver Mead deed in 1916, which designated the area partly as a sewage treatment plant, partly as a park, and said that it shall never be used for a business purpose and should not be a nuisance to the neighbors. Court injunctions in the 1970s supported the deed restrictions and designated Grass Island as a park and a permanent deed-restricted open space. Management plan in 1975 established the entire area outside the sewage treatment plant as managed conservation area, and the Grass Island Master Plan in 1990, approved by the RTM, P&Z, the Conservation Commission, and by the State of Connecticut Environmental Agency, reconfirmed the nature of the area as conservancy and park, and prohibited uses other than passive use and water-dependent uses, except for the sewage treatment plant. The neighbors and town have a long history of protecting this valuable waterfront area. We believe that a dog park does not meet the criteria for a passive use park. The distinction between passive and active might be shown by analogy. A parent and child playing catch in a grassy park area would be a passive use. This can be contrasted with ball games played by teams on a ball field with fences, with laid out baselines and bases and foul lines, and that would be an active use. We argue that as a dog park is fenced in, will have restricted access with locked gates, is limited to dogs and their owners, with age limits, requires a list of rules for use by the health department, requires cleanup, and needs extensive supervision by several town departments, that it does not meet the criteria for a passive use park. The area chosen for the dog park is in a conservancy area. The area that the sewage treatment plant might the argument or the idea that the sewage treatment plant might someday need to expand into the area being sought for a dog park does not allow a change in the site's status today from conservancy as defined by the Grass Island Master Plan to some other status which allows it to be used for other purposes. Also, the Department of Public Works has said that the sewage treatment plant is in full compliance and no expansion should be necessary for the foreseeable future. There is an issue of the process by which the dog park was sprung on the neighbors. We learned about Grass Island as the site for a dog park in Greenwich time. It had already been voted on by the selectmen, and the paper described it basically as a done deal. This process is directly contrary to the ideal process described by First Selectman Jim Lash at a meeting of Neighborhood Association representatives I attended in March of this year. Mr. Lash made a point of saying that he wanted town government to operate with input from the neighborhoods. Well, it didn't happen in this case. No one even told us that Grass Island was under consideration, and certainly did not ask for any input. It was done suddenly in the summer when many people are away and not expecting new issues to pop up and to be presented as already voted on. As the idea of a dog park was ruled out for Grass Island in 2000, we thought the issue had been settled. A number of other areas, such as Coscob, Byram, Pine Needham, Pemberwick Park, and Ladden's Rock area, had more recently been considered and rejected for various reasons. As a result, our neighborhood feels that we were deliberately blindsided so that the town departments pushing this project could move forward to complete the project with little organized scrutiny, questioning, or possible resistance. Another reason we felt the project was rushed through was that there were so many unanswered questions when the town departments brought the projects before various committees. Issues such as an operating plan, potential parking conflicts, cleanup responsibilities, the potential for liability, creating a new destination point for out-of-towners, supervision and monitoring by various town departments. There seemed to be enough open questions that the committees gave conditional approval for a trial period of 1 year. But there are no standards for measuring its performance or judging success, and no independent body empowered to make the decision to terminate the experiment. The larger issue here is that this is a bad precedent. Approval of a dog park, given all these negative considerations, will set a precedent whereby town departments can set aside agreements established over the years and approved by the RTM for other passive use parks and areas with other restrictions, and impose projects on neighborhoods that they would have reason to oppose. We see this as a long-term problem. In other words, neighborhoods will find that they are not well protected as they thought they were, and could be fighting sneak attacks over some town department's pet project. Even if the Grass Island Dog Park is allowed as a trial run, it will still set a precedent of how town departments can push through projects they choose to back, and do so in a way that puts neighborhoods at a disadvantage. Clearly, this relatively small piece of land is not the answer for those who want a place for all Greenwich and out-of-town dogs to run, or those who want to tighten enforcement of the leash laws in return for offering a dog park. We think that if a Grass Island dog park goes through, in the manner in which it has been carried out thus far, other residents could find a dog park or some other project in their neighborhood with little warning. To sum up, we believe that a dog park placed on Grass Island would violate protections for an open park and conservancy area built up over the years and approved by the RTM and other bodies, and that it has been brought to us by a very neighborhood-unfriendly process. And that creates a bad precedent and should be rejected. The RTM is the final protection for our neighborhoods, and we are appealing to you to please vote yes to overturn this particular municipal improvement. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lash will be our next speaker, but before he begins, let me just say I was aware that there were some young people on the list, at least 2 who were in favor of the dog park. It would be my intention to allow them to go next. If there are any students or young people on the list against the dog park at Grass Island, if you could alert me to that, I'd bump them up so they could get out of here earlier. Mr. Lash, our first selectman, you have up to 10 minutes.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen of the town meeting, good evening. I want to start by saying that the point of having all of these government boards and commissions is to have them run an orderly process, and a process that gives as many people as possible numerous opportunities to be heard. The processes are intended to be fair and open and transparent, and they're based on documents in many cases which have been used as the basis for decisions over a long period of time, not the least of which is the Plan of Conservation and Development, which has been quoted here. But those organizations, as they go through their normal process, as the professional staff advises them, and as they do their own research, refer to all the documents that you've heard listed here by the proponent of this particular resolution, that is, the opponents of the dog park. So it's not as if all of these items have not been considered carefully and thoughtfully by boards and commissions who have no particular interest in dog parks one way or another. They're there to represent you and because in many cases you appointed them, and to represent the citizens of the town in a fair and open way. This item has been with us as we look back at the files since 1999. Perhaps someone was talking about it before that, but that's the earliest document we can find in the files. And it has been the subject of discussion by Selectman Prince and then Bergstresser and now myself. During the last campaign 2 years ago, this subject was discussed at length in numerous meetings with neighborhood groups across the town, many of whom pressed me to move this item forward, and that is why you have it before you this evening, because it was one of the things that people strongly wanted to see happen. We had 1,400 people sign a petition for this item, but there are several thousand licensed dogs in town, and perhaps, unfortunately, a number of unlicensed dogs. And as you all know, those dogs must, by ordinance, be kept on a leash at all times unless they're on the owner's private property. Thus, if I'm interested in engaging with my dog in a passive form of recreation as defined here this evening, such as catch frisbee, I can't do it in any town facility because I'd look kind of silly, toss the frisbee, run with the dog on the leash to try to catch it. This space is already used for recreation less active than the game of catch, which was described as passive by the proponent of this resolution earlier. That is to say, people walk their dogs on this property regularly. They walk them on leash, occasionally illegally off leash, but primarily on leash. So if walking them on leash is passive, and if a father and son playing catch is passive, I would argue maybe an owner and a dog playing frisbee catch is passive, but I need to get the dog off leash. And that's really all that's before you. We're going to have people walking their dogs on this property anyway. The question is, can we take the dog off leash for a little while and play a little frisbee, or just watch the dog walk around on its own? Now, as your first selectman, my first job is to bring things to you so you have an opportunity to vote on them. And so we've done that. But more to the point, I have to try to defend the town's processes And I want to review the process for a second, though you've heard it, because I want to just correct a couple of misimpressions you might have. First, this is not something that was done quickly in the summertime. The first formal vote on this was held at a public meeting of this particular proposal now, was held at a public meeting of the Board of Parks and Recreation in May of 2005. So it was not something done in the summer quickly. Parks and Recreation considered this item at length. They had seen other proposals for other sites. We considered 10 sites actively, but we looked at probably a dozen others around town that we never looked at seriously enough to bring them forward. So the Parks staff, and in some cases some of the Parks board members, had seen other proposals and discussed them along the way. One in particular you'll recall that received a lot of conversation was the idea of a shared dog park with Stamford over on that border. And another that had a lot of conversation was behind the New Lebanon School. Both of those in the end were rejected, at least for now. So the Board of Parks and Recreation considered this carefully. The parks staff considered it carefully. They visited dog parks in the neighboring communities. They looked at Norwalk and Ridgefield, and we have, as you heard earlier, literally hundreds of dog parks around the country. So we have lots of precedent, lots of opportunity to learn from other people's designs. The Parks Board does that kind of thing. That's what they think about. They and the Parks staff think about how will this work. It then went to the Board of Selectmen as their recommendation. The Board of Selectmen considered it in another public meeting, which was also publicly noticed, and decided to approve this item. It then went to the went to the Board of Health. I'm sorry, went to the Board of Health. The Board of Health had lots of concerns about this. They are, after all, the people who created the leash law in the first place. They're primarily concerned with safety. They are the ones who suggested that children below a certain age should not be in the area. They are the ones who said that they wanted to be able to review this at any time, not necessarily a year from now, but at any time if they think that there is a difficulty here that needs to be corrected. So they reserve that right at all times. And in any case, they strongly recommended that we look at this formally again in a year, and we agreed to do that. We have no problem with that. And the Board of Health then approved this item. Went to the Conservation Commission. The Conservation Director looked at the site. Remember, her primary responsibility is to look at all of these lands and decide whether or not they are being properly conserved and give professional advice to her board. Her board also visited the site and talked about it. We had studies done of the site, and their conclusion was that there was no conservation or environmental problem on this site. And finally, it went to Planning and Zoning for MI. They held, again, public meetings. Many of the people who are here objecting to the park tonight were heard at those meetings. That's the place where we're required to give formal notice to people. We gave that formal notice. People were certainly heard, and again, Planning and Zoning approved the project. So now you have before you something that has been thoroughly reviewed. I was going to say vetted, but you would have thought I was making a pun. That has been thoroughly reviewed, and done so in a thoughtful way. All of the issues that are being raised tonight, every single one of them has been raised at one or more of these other meetings, and the people that you appointed and your professional staff all recommended that we go forward with this project, and I urge you to reject this proposition so that we may go forward with this project tonight. Thank you very much.
All right. Are the students who signed up for the dog park present? I think I saw them leave before. Yes. All right. Then why don't we begin with Phil McDonough, who has signed up against the dog park at Grass Island, to be followed by Gordon Ennis of District 8.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM. My name is Philip McDonough, and I live on Shore Road across the street from the proposed dog park. I'm here tonight on behalf of a neighbor who was on the Conservation Commission and served on the special committee for Grass Island that formed the Grass Island Master Plan. She could not attend tonight, and I am speaking on her behalf. This appeal is not about the dog park itself. From our standpoint, it is irrelevant if the dog park works out or not. This is not the issue. The issue is about protecting Grass Island from a use which has not been permitted, and it is about the precedent, which has been covered here already. One particular relevant court case supports this position. This was a case in which the town of Greenwich was enjoined from using Bruce Park for a dog pound, as well as certain other inappropriate uses, on the grounds that these uses were in violation of the deed from Robert Bruce to the town. The Robert Bruce deed contained almost exactly the same language as the deed to Grass Island, for no other purpose except for public park purposes. You have been told by a town attorney that it is legal for the town to construct a dog park on Grass Island. I honestly do not know if it is legal or not. However, I sincerely hope that you will consider that the town has a moral obligation, if not a legal one, to honor its commitment under the original deed and its commitments over the years to continue the use of Grass Island for public park purposes. This moral commitment was honored by First Selectman Lolly Prince, in 2000 when Grass Island was proposed by special interests for the skateboard park and for the dog park. If you have the articles from year 2000 describing this. If the town refuses to honor this commitment, what assurances do we as residents have that our voices will be heard and our will be honored when the town decides to place any other inappropriate use in yet another park in yet another part of town? This is not about the dog park. It is about honoring commitments and doing the right thing for Grass Island, but more importantly, for every other public park in town. The town has claimed the dog park is not in a managed conservation area. It's in an area set aside for expansion of the sewage plant. The town argument is disingenuous. The area set aside for expansion is an arbitrary line on paper. It does not exist in the field. It is not operable. It is an estimate of space that might be needed in the future and may well change when firms' plans are drawn. Until this happens, the area of the dog park remains managed conservation area. The use of this area for the sewage plant will be a permitted use. The use of the area for a dog park is not permitted use. It is disingenuous to say the dog park can be
30 seconds.
Can be turned into a permitted use by putting in a land set aside for the sewage treatment plant. The town describes Grass Island as a mixed-use park. The permitted uses in Grass Island are passive recreation, water-dependent uses, and managed conservation. The boat club, the walking trails, fishing, and boat storage. The town is using the mixed use to imply to you that a precedent has been set to place any use on Grass Island, irrespective of whether it is passive or water-dependent, and this assertion is simply not supportable. Thank you for your time.
Gordon Ennis, to be followed by Sil Pecora.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, and good evening, members. Initially, I was opposed to the idea of a dog park in Greenwich for some of the same reasons that have been made here tonight and have made this proposal such a lively debate. During the past week, however, I did some of my own research, and I want to share the conclusions with you tonight. The most important is namely this. If you talk to people who have dogs, they'll tell you that there are two kinds of dog owners. There are dog people. Yes, dog people. That's an appellation that they give themselves. And there are people who have dogs as pets. The distinction, I think, is critical because I believe it justifies the votes for a dog park in town. Dog people are owners who have a unique dedication to their pets. They will pack them up, drive some distance, to allow the dogs to run freely, to socialize with other dogs while they socialize with other owners. Dogs smell everything to their heart's content. By the way, the sense of smell is the way that dogs understand the world they live in. So it's critical that they do it. And finally, dog people will use this park. They want it, and they're the ones who are going to go there. They'll police it themselves. They will keep it clean. They will discipline their dogs. They will demand the same kind of behavior from other owners. They'll enjoy the company of other dedicated owners. They'll have a good time. Then let's contrast those with people who just have dogs as pets. They generally walk the dog. They're kind to the dog. They let the dog loose in the backyard. It's generally a solo operation. Maybe two people will walk it, but we see them around the streets of town all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. Most clean up after their dogs. Many do not. This park rewards good behavior by pet owners. In the long run, it encourages good behavior from all owners. I think we ought to give it a go for a year. Some argue that
30 seconds.
Some argue that dogs who don't live in Greenwich will use the park. So what? How many households in Greenwich, how many of us have visitors from out of town who bring their pets with them? Let's give it a go for a year. And finally, some insist that we should not set aside parks for special groups. But we've done that with playgrounds for children, golf courses for golfers, marinas for boaters. Why not for dog owners? They're people too. Let's give it a go for 1 year. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
If we hold the applause, I think we can get through this quicker. Mr. Pecora, to be followed by Chris von Kaiserling, District 8. You mean you're waiving your right to speak? I'm waiving at the bell. Thank you. So we're not getting the scoop from you tonight? All right, to be followed by Dr. Elizabeth Lynch. Mr. Pecora.
Mr. Moderator and RTM members, I'm Sil Pecora of the Friends of Grass Island. Our committee met with Parks and Rec at Grass Island the day before the paper announced the dog park was to be at Grass Island. And no one said anything to us at that meeting. It was a surprise to all of us. 15 years ago, Parks was supposed to implement the master plan, but didn't do anything until the Friends of Grass Island came along. We have been working for the last 3.5 years to have Parks and Rec implement the Grass Island master plan. To date, we received an area of parkland, which is nicely manicured, and a new blacktop, only to have car carriers, tractor trailers, come in to unload automobiles and over time ruin that $188,000 that you applied for that blacktop. The master plan states there should be no parking at Grass Island except for the employees employed at Grass Island and those people using Grass Island for recreation only, not car carriers. The master plan also states there should be screening for the boat storage area, which they still haven't done, even though they promised us, and it's in the master plan. They have been working on the boatyard for 15 years now, and it still looks a mess. There are no rules or regulations to govern Grass Island, and no one to implement them. If they had the rules, the dockmaster has no power. Parks keeps saying that the supervision of the dog park will be from his department and the police department. No one knows who will open the dog park if it's locked, because it's before the part-time dockmaster comes in, and who will lock it up at night, because it's after the time when everyone who works at Grass Island goes home. The master plan recommends serious consideration of additional means of improving security to the island. There will be no supervision of the dog park because there is no supervision of Grass Island. The police have to see the violations that occur so that the police will not be able to help. Just this past weekend, we found a brand new tree planted 3 weeks ago or more. It was cut down. Now we are inviting dog owners from all over town and out of town to come here because we will have a dog park. Remember the petition for the dog park had 150 out-of-towners on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Elizabeth Lynch, to be followed by Elizabeth Ronda.
Hello, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Lynch. I'm a licensed veterinarian. I'm a graduate of Cornell University's College of Veterinary Medicine and chairman of the board for Cornell's College of Veterinary Medicine. And I'm also the past chair of the state of Ohio's Animal Welfare Committee, during which time I developed a plan for that state to reduce the number of dog bites. I'm a resident of Riverside, I'm a Greenwich native, and I'm here to answer some of the questions that were raised by RTM members about a dog park in Greenwich, and to ask you all to vote no on resolution number 17. 3 concerns I'd like to address. The first is the size of the dog park. I've consulted with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which sets guidelines for the space requirements for group exercising of dogs. The allowable numbers of dogs in a 3/4 acre site is staggering. Suffice it to say that we are well below the operating guidelines for what we're projecting, about 20 dogs maximum. Realize that the average number at any given time would be more likely 6 to 10. So size is more than adequate for projected use. The second is the potential for increased noise. And for that, I'd like to ask you all, why do dogs bark? Dogs are social animals. For the most part in the town of Greenwich, dogs are left confined behind invisible fences in the backyard. They feel abandoned. They're lonely, isolated, frustrated. They're equivalent of shut-ins. Dog parks allow dogs to get out, socialize with their owners, other dogs. They're happy. They don't bark. If in some case there is an increased amount of noise for usage in the dog park, we have a 15-foot high berm surrounding the dog park, which is more than an effective barrier for sound. The third is the potential for increased liability to the town of Greenwich. Risk management and the town attorney have reviewed the dog park proposal, and they have concurred that there's no need to change any liability coverage because of this dog park. The vast majority of dog bites occur on the dog's own property, the dogs protecting their own property. A dog park is neutral territory, so there's no need for a dog to bite to defend its own territory. In addition, children ages 5 through 9 constitute the vast majority of victims in dog bites, and the park has limited the use of the park to people over the age of 10, so we really have limited the amount of liability. I would urge the RTM to vote no on item number 17. I realize that this resolution has put you in a difficult position of rejecting the opinions of all the experts whom you have appointed to the numerous commissions and boards that have already scrutinized and unanimously accepted this proposal. A yes vote tonight would require an extraordinary ground or overwhelming reason to reverse the actions of all the other governing bodies in town. Plus, this project will sunset in a year. There's no risk to voting no to this proposal, and it will be subject to the review of all the aforementioned boards and commissions before it can be continued. Thank you.
Elizabeth Ronda, to be followed by Liz Horton.
Good evening to all. My name is Elizabeth Ronda, and I speak to you as a mother. I live at 301 Shore Road, across from the proposed site of Grass Island Dog Park. I have 4 young boys. I had come out of my house the other day. I had sent my children out a few seconds before me, and I was horrified to see my 3 children in the road within inches from a car that I did not recognize, speaking to a woman I did not recognize, who was asking my children for help finding her lost dog. I live 300 yards down from the proposed site. I asked why, after all our talks, they had spoken to a stranger and gotten so close to a car, and their reply was, "Mommy, she lost her dog." As a Dateline NBC special brought out in one of their investigative pieces, even children who would otherwise not be lured by a stranger will let their guard down when it comes to a stranger with a dog. Now, these boys are not strangers to potential threats. We have had reason to speak with them frequently and at length. Within the last 9 months, they've lived through the green van incident. At their school, the Westchester homeless shelter decided to house 6 sex offenders, and now their campus has become a police lockdown. The plan regarding safety concerns relating to this park will not give neighborhood parents any comfort. There is no plan to effectively monitor it and supervise it, no plans to enforce its rules, and no plan to ensure that the wrong element does not come out of the park and into our neighborhood. There is no doubt by inviting in scores of people to our neighborhood, the town is also inviting in potential predators. And we cannot ask our youngest citizens to shoulder the burden of their safety when the town makes an unnecessary risk and puts it in their path. A good neighbor of mine called me yesterday and said she had seen my son skateboarding down from Grass Island, and she said how unfortunate it would be if that was the last time he had such freedom. Please, I urge you, do not create an environment where our dogs can run free, yet our neighborhood children are put at risk for a poorly thought out plan that will not solve any of the issues that you are trying to solve. Thank you.
Liz Horton, to be followed by Lisa Edwards.
I'm a proponent of the dog park. I'm also a Stamford resident and was forced to move there 2 years ago after renting most of my life in Greenwich. I work full-time exclusively in Greenwich, which is sometimes 18 to 24-hour days, as a full-time pet sitter and dog walker. And I might add that most of my clients have voiced that they would like to see a dog park in town. One of the reasons people hire me is to take their dogs out for exercise and to meet with other dogs. So by having a park somewhat counteracts my job. Residents could then have a place to take their dogs to by themselves. I've been involved with trying to establish a dog park in town for over 5 years since a group of us first gathered for the cause. We believe that the dog park is essential in this town. It will provide owners an area to bring their dogs to instill socialization skills so that their dog may become better behaved with not only other dogs but other people too. Like people, dogs are social animals. They need fresh air, exercise, and social interaction. Leash walking is not always adequate, and with my job, I can tell you that firsthand. Likewise, people come to the park to socialize, make friendships, exchange canine tips, and generally feel their lives are enriched. Essentially, every dog park is a people park. People who own dogs enjoy the company of like-minded people. It's just another avenue of passive use. Let's remember here that your vote tonight is not to determine whether a dog park is needed in town. That has already been determined with the approval of 5 boards and commissions. The issue is whether a dog park is legally allowed to be placed in this specific area and whether it is violating deed restrictions as a non-passive park use. As you've heard from qualified officials tonight, nothing has been violated in accordance with the deed. Speaking for the dog owners group of Greenwich, we urge you to vote no on item 17. Thank you.
Lisa Edwards, to be followed by Todd Ladonia, District 8.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Rader Edwards, and I live at 524 Field Point Road in the same house I grew up in as a child. My husband, who also grew up in Greenwich, and I moved back here to start a family 12 years ago. I grew up in a very civic-minded household. My father, Bill, was on the Planning and Zoning Board for over 10 years. And my mother, Joan Rader, served on the RTM and the RTC and was involved in many things political, as well as many community organizations. So I think I have some idea of how things should work in Greenwich, which is why I am so incredibly outraged by the tactics of the town as it concerns putting this dog park in Grass Island. I recently found out that the town has been trying to get a dog park in Greenwich for some years. They tried to put it in Bruce Park in Open Meadow, Byram Park, and on the border of Stamford and Greenwich. But at every turn, the neighbors had a chance to discuss it, and their point of view prevailed. In this case, there was no notification until after it was approved, and we had to find out about it through our local newspaper. It was then that we neighbors requested a meeting with Mr. Lash. The dog park proponents have tried to tell you in RTM meetings that we had ample notification, but this is just not true. Also, usually, these kinds of ideas are formulated and argued by residents, and then they are passed or not passed by the town. As you may be aware, in this case, the town passed its own plan for a dog park, which to me sounds like a conflict of interest. That is why we so need you, RTM members, to hear us tonight. We do not have a problem with Greenwich having a dog park. We just have a problem with putting it in a coastal, passive-use, protected park. Thank you.
Todd Ladonia, to be followed by Mark Ronda.
Mr. Moderator, special guests, fellow members, Todd Ladonia from District 8. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Relier and the other homeowners for coming to us as the final governing body in the town. We finally have a chance to make a decision. Personally, I'd also like to see a video of Mr. Lash throwing the Frisbee chasing the dog on the leash. Also, some of us go on vacation in the wintertime. So the fact that something came up in the summer and the neighbors feel they were blindsided, as I say, some of us go away in the wintertime, and things happen in the wintertime also. I come back from somewhere where it's warm because I like to enjoy our parks here that we have in town in the summertime. I tend to go away in the winter. So you have to live with when you go away. The resolution comes to us asking to overturn decisions made by boards and commissions we all have appointed. Without getting to the absurd substance of this issue, we must all consider that a vote in favor of this resolution is the beginning of undermining a system of municipal improvements that we continually monitor as a matter of course. To the argument that a dangerous precedent is being set, again, I say, we have a system that will oversee any change, and the same process will be followed. To the substance, I can only say this is a 3/4 acre fenced area next to the sewer treatment plant. I find it hard to believe that anyone is strolling in this area and their rights to passive recreation are being infringed upon. The dog park proponents are happy to have this site, and I believe this is not a pork barrel project being handed to a small special interest group. Let the dogs romp relatively freely, and please vote against this resolution.
Mark Ronda, to be followed by Jennifer Kaplan.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, RTM members, town officials, and our first selectman, Jim Lash. My name is Mark Ronda. I live at 301 Shore Road. I've lived there for 11 years, and I was born and raised in this town. To many here this evening, especially on the heels of our last speaker, this might appear as a decision regarding 3/4 of an acre of a really unattractive strip of land next to a water treatment facility. Quite the contrary. This will have a monumental impact on all the other protected parks for years to come. Grass Island is the most protected park in our town. Yet, as sure as I'm standing here this evening, it will only be a matter of time before another constituency uses this ruling to win their battle on a cordoned-off piece of land, which they will argue is also passive use. A use that was not intended by the original grantors, and the town will be put in the unenviable position of adhering to a court ruling in granting their application. Grass Island protected status has stood for 90 years. There's a reason the language is very strong. A dog park is not wrong for Greenwich. It is wrong for all parks that have restricted open space use and provide passive enjoyment of water-dependent activities. Give the proponents a dog park they're proud of. Give our neighborhood the protection it deserves and preserve the reason why many chose to live there in the first place. But above all, give our community the peace of mind knowing that one of the reasons that makes Greenwich different from any other town in America is that town planners have involved neighborhoods of their decisions in their infancy and will always preserve the integrity of their parks. Thanks again.
Jennifer Kaplan, to be followed by Mimi Relier.
Good evening, RTM members. I am here this evening in favor of the dog park in Greenwich. We began working for a dog park over 4 years ago. During those years, my fellow Girl Scouts and I have organized a support for a dog park through the annual Memorial Day Parade, and last year we hosted the first Halloween pet parade in support for a dog park. Over 75 people and their dogs were on Greenwich Avenue. Tonight, I am requesting your vote in support of a safe, fenced-in area for our dogs to socialize and exercise. We are here tonight because the dogs cannot speak for themselves. It is just 3/4 of an acre in this huge town. Please vote no for the appeal. It has passed all the town approvals. All I ask is to give it a try. Please support Dog Park by voting no to the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Mimi Relier, to be followed by Helen Fleischman.
Good evening. I am a member of the District 2 RTM. I am one of the 1,250 Greenwich residents who did sign the petition requesting a dog park. I would love to have a beautiful dog park in this town. However, Grass Island is not the appropriate place because of the precedent that we have heard over and over and over again tonight. One of the things that the master plan prohibited was that no parking should be permitted on Grass Island except for such parking as directly related to recreation park facilities and what we have heard. I heard today that the town had issued a permit to a person in Bellhaven so that his workers could park at Grass Island while working at his house to alleviate a problem there. I know that Sil Pecora referred to the problem with trailers. Both of these incidents are business purposes. Actually, walking a dog for hire is business purposes too. This is a violation right there of the town deed way back in 1916. I have an awful lot of things to discuss. I had one thing I wanted to discuss, but issues tonight have made me think I have to discuss other things. I would like to refer to the process. On July 23rd, the newspaper first put that the selectmen had approved this dog park. I didn't know anything about it. Somebody in my district called me because I'm on the RTM. I said the only thing I knew about it was in 1990 we had looked into this and it had been ruled in, in 2000 we had looked into this and it had been ruled out. I read the paper just like all the rest of you. I knew about the possibility of Stanford. I knew a possibility of Julian Curtis School, Byram, etc. In looking into this and contacting other RTM members, it was Friday when the paper was put out. We were into a weekend situation. By then, other neighbors were calling me. By the time I got hold of our representative to Health and Human Services, he had just come back from a meeting regarding the dog park, and that actually I heard later that people were surprised at that meeting that neighbors did not know about it. We, on that Tuesday night, on that particular day, Tuesday, 3 days later, the newspaper printed the results of that meeting and that the rules and regulation for the park. We had a meeting with Mr. Lash as a group. At that point, we were told we should have already known about this because there was a notice on the town bulletin board. Most of us work for a living. We don't stand there, reading the town bulletin board. I really wanted to get into safety tonight. I am very concerned in talking to the dock master that he has no sight of this area. I think I ran into somebody at the dog park who was coming in from New York State saying, "Where's the dog park? I hear you have a dog park." We're going to get a lot of people from out of town. Crime is an issue here. We've been lucky over these years. My house has been robbed twice. My gas has been taken out of my boat at Grass Island.
Helen Fleischman, to be followed by Joe Conboy.
Good evening. Dear RTM members, on Saturday morning around 9 a.m. I drove to Grass Island and down and around Shore Road to see how close the neighbors' homes were to the proposed site of the dog park. I was truly amazed that the homes on Shore Road sit extremely high up with long, winding driveways leading from the street. Most of the homes sit at least 150 to 200 feet from the street, with the exception of one house that may be 75 feet from the street. There were no cars in the parking lot at the park, and except for the traffic in and out of the marina, there was no other traffic on Grass Island Road. As I left my car, the only noise, which was quite prominent, was coming from the traffic on I-95. I walked into the park and noticed that several trees have been marked to show how to enter the proposed site. I walked through the trees and up the incline, still hearing the traffic noise. When I began to walk down the incline toward the sewage treatment plant, the noise of rushing water being pumped through the various channels of the plant took over. There was no offensive odor. The site is marked by stakes outlining the area designated for the park. I urge you all to visit it. As I was walking back out of the park, I noticed someone walking a dog off-leash, coming out of the conservation area. When he saw me, he quickly leashed the dog and walked out of the park towards Shore Road. I imagine it was one of the neighbors who routinely walks his dog in that area. So what could be the objection of neighbors to the dog park? My feeling is that the neighbors believe the Grass Island belongs to them. They do not want anyone else using this site. They are merely protecting what they clearly feel belongs only to them.
All right. I didn't indicate at the beginning, but one of the rules we have here is we don't ascribe improper motives. Everyone is entitled to be heard, but and this works both ways, but let's not ascribe any improper motives to either side. Thank you.
Okay. So in closing, Greenwich needs and wants a designated safe area where all dogs are welcome to socialize and exercise off-leash. Please vote no to item 17, which opposes that right for all. Thank you.
Joe Conboy, to be followed by Sam Romeo.
Mr. Moderator, members of the town meeting, in 1916, Oliver Mead gave Grass Island to the town of Greenwich with the following stipulations: that the property never be used for business purposes whatsoever except for the construction and operation of a sewer plant, and for no other purposes except park purposes, and that said premises shall never be used as to be or become a nuisance to the residential property about said harbor. The injunctions against the town of Greenwich, filed in 1975 and 77, upheld the stipulations of the Oliver Mead deed. In 1988, the Planning and Zoning Commission, as a requirement for the approval of the preliminary plans for the Grass Island Sewage Treatment Plant, requested a committee formed to develop a comprehensive plan for the entire Grass Island property. The Department of Public Works agreed to try to include the costs of parking, sidewalk, and roadway improvements as shown on the plan to be included in the sewage treatment plant upgrading facility or budget. The master plan for Grass Island specifically states that Grass Island be used for passive recreations, marine-related uses, later changed to read water-dependent use, the town sewage plant, and the managed conservation area. On November 20th, 1990, at a public hearing, the Planning and Zoning Commission approved the Grass Island Master Plan because it was consistent with the land use plan section of the Plan of Development and is a valuable planning tool that sets direction for present and future use of the significant waterfront property. Therefore, the master plan of Grass Island was approved and amended to the Town Plan of Conservation and Development. In June of 1991, the RTM approved the resolution requested by the Planning and Zoning Commission to adopt the Grass Island Master Plan and make it part of the town's Plan of Conservation and Development. In July 9, 1990, in a letter written by First Selectman John B. Margonaut, Jr. to the citizens who helped create the Grass Island Master Plan, states, "This plan will be a guideline for years to come regarding the use of Grass Island." Grass Island is protected by a deed, a Grass Island Master Plan, which was approved by the town government and praised by town officials. If we put a dog park at Grass Island in a managed conservation area, we will be starting a precedent. What is there to stop the town officials to put a dog park at Byron Beach, Todd's Point, or Island Beach?
30
At
seconds.
least for now, these areas are safe, but what is in store for them in the future? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sam Romeo, to be followed by Mary Ambrosio.
I wish I could have Chris von Keyserling's 3 minutes, but I guess that's not possible. The first thing I'd like to say is, you've all heard the phrase, "I'm the government, I'm here to help you." First thing you do is hold on to your wallet. And, you know, I've been involved in town politics for the past 25 years. And for the life of me, I've never seen an item pass at warp speed through the different town departments. And as the first selectman said, the first hearing was with the Board of Park Rec on the 5th of May. So you take the 5th of May to now, and here we are, and we have had, I believe, the Board of Parks and Rec, the Board of Health, Board of Selectmen, Conservation Commission, Planning and Zoning, especially Planning and Zoning. You know where things get tied up and they spend a lot of time, and things are postponed and brought back month after month. So to see this thing pass and to say that it wasn't pass along in a quick manner, I'd say beam me up, Scotty, you know. The dog park at its present location. First of all, I was one of the signatories of the 1,400 that signed that petition to have a dog park. I have a dog, and I'd love to have my dog run freely in a park. I've been to other parks in other towns, and they dedicate 5, 10, 15, 20 acres or more of land to parks. And the town of Greenwich, being the first in everything and is well known for doing things right, I don't think we're doing things right at this time. To put the dog park on 3/4 of an acre near a sewer plant that stinks, and I have to beg to differ with one of the previous speakers to say it doesn't smell. I know it smells, and I've been in constant battles at one point in time when we had atomizers buried in the woods to try to cover up the stink. So don't say it doesn't smell. I think we're taking on added liability that we don't need. I think the health department made a mistake by taking the leash law off the dogs, especially in a confined area such as 3/4 acres, because if dogs get into a fight, no matter how social they are, they get ticked at one point or another, just like human beings lose their tempers. And if they get into a fight, how are you going to separate these dogs that are not in a leash in this small confined area? The simple answer is someone's going to get bit. And to say that we're self-insured up to $500,000, what we all know now from past instances where we've been sued, and the $500,000 kicked in, but we've always lost these suits for $10 million, $6 million.
30
But
seconds.
then our liability coverage now has been cut in half by the insurance company, and we're now paying twice as much for our liability coverage for the $500,000 self-insurance over that. I have a lot more to say, just can't get it all in, but just remember, I'm the government, I'm here to help you. This is your chance to do a yes vote and not to assume that our government never makes a mistake. Our government sometimes do make mistakes, and I hope you support the resolution.
Mary Ambrosio, to be followed by Tina Volkwine.
Hi, Mr. Moderator, fellow RTM members, and guests. I'm a very
Could you pull that mic down a little? Thank you.
I'm a very new member of the RTM, but I've been sitting here listening to this all night, and I think we're missing the main point. I think the point of all this is the responsibility of the dog owners. When we assume the responsibility of owning a pet, we also assume the responsibility of its care. And I do not believe it is the responsibility of the town to care for our pets, or that we should provide a park for them. I think when we took that pet into our home, we said we would care for it. And up to this point, we have. And it's our responsibility to walk the dog, to see that it gets its exercise and whatever else is necessary for its care. Thank you for the opportunity. I would say vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Tina Volkwine, to be followed by Joan Caldwell.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM. My name is Tina Volkwine, and I live on Field Point Road in the neighborhood of, but not adjacent to, Grass Island. But I am one of the petitioners on the appeal before you, and I am here tonight not because I oppose the idea of a dog park in Greenwich, but because I think it is just not right to put it on Grass Island, and especially that a trial period does not make a wrong thing any more right. I have attended several of the relevant meetings leading up to this one, including one with Mr. Lash, the Conservation Commission meeting, and the Planning and Zoning meeting, in which the project was given its conditional approval. And I would just like to talk about all of the things I observed in the process that just don't seem right. It just doesn't seem right that the neighborhood found out about the proposed Grass Island Dog Park in the press. It doesn't seem right that, as of the Conservation Commission meeting, we were told there had been no studies done about the usage of the dog park, but that at that meeting we learned the parking director from the town has produced a document stating that Grass Island has sufficient parking for a dog park without such a study. It doesn't seem right that the Conservation Commission, which should be the most stringent body, had enough reservations about the dog park to approve it only with the recommendation that Planning and Zoning approve it for a one-year trial, but not enough reservations to reject it. It doesn't seem right that Planning and Zoning approved the project when roughly 20 citizens, many of them neighbors, spoke against it, and only 1 or 2 citizens, apart from town officials, spoke in favor of it. It doesn't seem right that Planning and Zoning approved the dog park conditionally when there was no person or agency designated to review its success or failure, though there are now a lot of people designated to write reports, and no specific criteria or limits established for such a review, and no mechanism detailed by which the park could be closed if it should be problematic. It doesn't seem right that the town insists the dog park can be adequately supervised when there is a poor record of maintenance of Grass Island by the town. It doesn't seem right that we are disregarding the will of a deceased benefactor of the town with no recourse, who deeded Grass Island to us with the stipulation that the land never be used in such a way as to be a nuisance to the neighbors when the neighbors have voiced concerns about traffic, parking, noise, maintenance, and safety regarding the dog park, and have thus in effect made it very clear that they would consider such a park a nuisance. It doesn't seem right that we have protested that a fenced-in facility violates the principles of open space and passive parks, and that the town insists it doesn't. Above all, it doesn't seem right that the town of Greenwich, Connecticut, wants to build a park facility enclosed by chain link fence and abutting a sewage treatment plant. At best, these plans are the result of well-intentioned citizens bringing a need to light and a well-intentioned town government trying to be effective. But people make mistakes, and the very agencies of the town charged with protecting our parks and making sure development takes place sensibly lost sight of the critical issues, thinking and voting that doing something wrong just for a trial period somehow makes it better. Please approve our appeal.
Joan Caldwell, to be followed by Mark Schroeder, who is our last name on the list.
Mr. Moderator, members of town meeting, one of the problems with living in town all your life is that you remember the way it was. And I remember Grass Island in the 50s when it was a fraction of its present size. And what it was a dump. I mean that literally. There were piles of rock and dirt that were collected from the creation of I-95 and various other sites around the town. This fill, this clean rock, was used to fill in the marsh, unfortunately, and to create a larger Grass Island. So what we bought, what we acquired in 1916 is nowhere near what we have now. And whatever restriction was put on it was put on the original piece, not what we have now. Now, I believe that Oliver Mead, in giving the land, and he didn't give it, we bought it, had some idea that it would be used in a certain way, and we have carried that idea forward. But that doesn't mean that we can't find other uses within the same framework. What troubles me most about this resolution is that it asks us as members of the town meeting to overturn a process. And the process was created not by one board or one commission or one individual on that board or commission, but on 5 or 6 boards or commissions and a total of over 30 people. And I just cannot make myself believe that 30 people that you and I, for the most part, interviewed and reviewed, failed to understand their charge to the taxpayers, the voters, and the citizens of Greenwich any less than you and I. Now, with regard to active and passive, I always have a little bit of a discussion about this with myself. I find it very difficult to believe that it's active recreation for a dog to run around a pen as long as I'm sitting watching him. And that's exactly what we're being asked to do here. Generally, and I have dogs, I must tell you, dogs are generally far more compatible with wildlife than any of us. They get along just fine. Rodents don't bother them. Big animals don't bother them. They all, God's creatures, just carve out their own section of the turf, and that's it.
30 seconds.
I believe that this location is probably as good as we're going to find. It's worthy of a try. I think 1 year is not asking too much. I do agree with the opponents that standards should be set, and they should be set before the park is open to the first dog. There must be some way that in a year we can judge whether this trial has been a success or a failure. But I, for one, am not voting against 30 citizens who serve free of time or free of charge as I do.
Mark Schroeder, to be followed by Roger Lurie.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just for everybody's information, I'm a member of District 2, and I'm also a longtime member of the Greenwich Harbor Neighborhood Association, who you've heard speak here earlier. I think my comments, though, are really from one RTM member, I think, to the rest of you. And here's what I would like you to think about. I've heard a number of comments here about that were somewhat negative about Grass Island, the smell, or it was a piece of rock or something like that. It wasn't the same as in 1917 or whatever. But what I'd like you to focus in on is the fact that all of that being said, in 1990s or thereabouts, the RTM and the P&Z and the First Selectmen all got together and they agreed formally in writing what to do with Grass Island. And Grass Island today, out of all of the parks that we have, this is the best documented use of what an open park, a passive park, should be. The other thing I'd ask you to consider is that town agencies are just that. More and more today, most of the employees who are on these town agencies don't live in Greenwich. They come here, they do their job. We live in Greenwich, and these are our neighbors. Our neighbors are coming to us tonight because they're telling us, and I think in a well-documented way, that they didn't get a fair shake in this deal, that this was the result of a very efficient town government here. But what happened is normally when somebody has a great idea for use for a passive park, it's an organization that petitions the town, and the town mechanism vets that. It challenges it. It has environmental studies. The P&Z looks at the history of the land. In this case, the town is the proponent. And so we have a $300 million budget town versus 188 some odd neighbors with all the history in the world about this park. And because the town was the proponent, we wind up in a situation where we have 5 boards approve a park, and in the process they overturn a well-established principle in our town that passive parks and waterfront parks should be passive and used for water-dependent uses. In this case, that didn't happen by the agencies. They didn't do their jobs because they were the proponents. So we can't sit here as RTM and say all of a sudden
30 seconds.
We should just follow what the town said. So the neighbors are coming to us and they're asking us to set this matter right, and our charter provides exactly for that. And finally, I would just like you to remember that passive use parks don't die automatically or catastrophically. They really die 3/4 of an acre at a time, being cordoned and sectioned off for specific uses. So I ask that you support our neighbors here and vote for their petition to overturn this. Thank you.
Roger Lurie, District 7. It has been moved and seconded to immediately cut off debate and proceed to vote on item 17. The motion for the previous question is not debatable, and it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. If you are in favor of immediately proceeding to vote, you should vote in favor of Mr. Lurie's motion. All those in favor of the motion for the previous question, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried. Now, before we pass the cards around, let's all be clear on what we are doing. The resolution is worded to reject the MI application. So if you are against the dog park being located at Grass Island, you should vote yes on item 17. If you are for the dog park being located at Grass Island, you should vote no on item 17. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item 17, and proceed to poll your delegation. Mr. DeCaro. All right, Mr. DeCaro has requested that the district chairs collect the Budget Overview Committee surveys, questionnaires, as you are taking the final votes tonight. While we are voting, we will continue with the business of the meeting. Item 2 now comes before us. That was an item postponed. That was postponed from our June meeting, so it is currently before us procedurally. May we have the reports of the committees that considered item number 2? We will begin with the report of our Appointments Committee. Colleen Jenkins, this is item 2.
Item 2 is Tom Baptist nominated to the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency. The call should be corrected so that it says Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency.
All right, that's correct. We had actually done this at our June meeting, but in preparing tonight's call, the substitute resolution that we moved in June was not printed on our call, and it was just a name change for the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency. So will a member please move the substitute resolution tonight as well, just to make that name? All right, it has been moved. The substitute resolution on item 2 has been moved and seconded. Colleen Jenkins, thank you.
Okay. The Appointments Committee gave our report on Tom Baptist at the June meeting. Our vote was 10-02 in favor of the nomination. There's nothing new to report.
Thank you. Franklin Bloomer with the Land Use Committee report.
The motion to postpone this item at the June meeting was a motion offered by myself on behalf of the Land Use Committee. The appointment is a reappointment of Tom Baptist as regular member of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency. We met with him again this past Monday evening. He is the current chairman of this agency, and he was formerly the conservation director of the town. We met with him last June, immediately before the June RTM meeting, because he could not meet with us the previous week when we had our regular meeting ahead of the June RTM meeting. At that meeting, the meeting immediately before the June RTM meeting, some issues were raised by Mike Aurelia, who is the delegate to our committee from District 3. He is a former director of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency, and coincidentally, his wife is the current conservation director. In other words, she succeeded Mr. Baptist in that position. The issue that he raised, or the principal issue that he raised at the June meeting, was that minutes for a significant number of meetings of the agency had not been prepared and approved. He had given no advance notice of the fact that he intended to raise this issue either to Mr. Baptist or to the agency staff. This issue took most of the time we had available before the commencement of the full town meeting, and Mr. Aurelia and other members of our committee had additional questions for Mr. Baptist, and that is why we moved for postponement until tonight. Since the June meeting, the agency has completed and approved the minutes that were missing. At our meeting last Monday evening, again with no advance notice of the fact that he intended to raise it, either to Mr. Baptist or to the agency, Mr. Aurelia raised a new issue, namely that the minutes did not include a statement of the reason why Mr. Baptist had recused himself in a significant number of times, and he cited a state statute that required that the reason for recusal be stated on the record. Mr. Baptist responded to this by saying that the statute does not require that the reason be stated in the minutes, and that the primary record of the agency meetings is a tape recording that is made of all meetings, and that he always states the reason at the meeting. Mr. Aurelia indicated that it would be difficult for him to review these tapes. Mr. Baptist gave the reason for his recusal in one instance that Mr. Aurelia identified at our meeting, and undertook after the meeting to give the reason for any other recusal that was identified in writing by Mr. Aurelia to him. Mr. Aurelia nonetheless made a motion to postpone consideration of Mr. Baptist's nomination until he had provided the reasons for his recusal in all instances over a 3-year period. This motion failed by a vote of 1 in favor, 6 opposed, with 1 abstention. Mr. Aurelia raised another and perhaps more basic issue. Mr. Baptist is the State Executive Director of the National Audubon Society, which operates the Audubon Center here in Greenwich. The Audubon Society raises funds from Greenwich donors, and in Mr. Aurelia's view, this creates a conflict of interest because prospective donors may appear before the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency. Mr. Baptist had obtained an opinion from the Board of Ethics on this issue back in 2001, and that issue stated that whether or not Mr. Baptist should recuse himself depended on the facts relating to each circumstance, including whether or not, and I quote, he was aware of the contribution, its amount, and the nature of the application itself. After this discussion, we proceeded to a vote. Our vote was 7 in favor of the nomination, none opposed with 1 abstention. Districts 6, 9, 10, and 12 were absent. The abstention was that of Mr. Aurelia. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on item 2. Mr. Perry, did you care to speak? Well, we're about to vote if we don't have any speakers. Don't want to, okay. Okay. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item number 2, and proceed to poll your delegation. All right, before we take up the next item, we're going to wait for the vote from District 5 on item 17, and I'll report that. And while we're waiting for that to be tabulated, I'd like to remind everyone, hopefully you all received a memo from our town clerk, Mrs. Budkins, those who are candidates for municipal office for the RTM in November. There is a certification that must be filed regarding the financing of your campaign. It's an exemption, but it is necessary to file that exemption if you're not spending over a certain amount. So please don't neglect that. There is a mandatory fine. It is supposed to be filed within 10 days of your becoming a candidate. So don't neglect that, please. Anyone who did not receive a copy, please contact the clerk's office about it. All right, the result of the vote on item 17, the dog park, again, yes votes are against the dog park, no votes are for the dog park at Grass Island. Those in favor, 61, opposed, 94, abstaining, 2. That item has failed. So the municipal, the effect of this is the municipal improvement has been approved by this body. Okay. All right. The last item on our agenda now comes before us. That is item number 3. That also is an item that was postponed, an appointment of Shirley Jankowicz as a member of the Board of Social Services for a term expiring March 3108. So that is currently before us procedurally. Colleen Jenkins with the report of the Appointments Committee.
Shirley Jankowicz was voted upon by the Appointments Committee. Our vote was 6 in favor, 5 against, District 12 absent. As you may recall, last June, the Appointments Committee voted to postpone the nomination until this meeting. The reason was twofold. First, it allowed the nominee, Shirley Jankovich, time to visit a social service meeting for the first time, and to learn where the Department of Social Services was located, for instance. I can report today that during the summer, the candidate not only attended some meetings, but also familiarized herself with some of the primary documents related to the department, such as the town annual report and the brand new outside consultants report. The second reason the Appointments Committee postponed the vote on the candidate was in anticipation of the release of this $75,000 consultant's report on the efficacy of the Department of Social Services. In July, the report was made public. Its title is Final Report Assessing the Efficacy of the Department of Social Services of the Town of Greenwich. Particularly useful to the Appointments Committee is one of the 3 recommendations made on page 43. Regarding governance and board function of the Department of Social Services in Greenwich, the report states, quote, request that the first selectman nominate board members who have knowledge of the social work field. I actually emailed Mr. Brody of the consulting firm asking him to expand on this, and basically he said a master's of social work or a licensed social work is what their conception of knowledge of the social work field is. So where do we stand today? Clearly, Shirley Jankovich, the candidate before you, is an art teacher, professionally educated in the field, and brings 37 years of experience as an art teacher to the table. In addition, as an art teacher, she occasionally worked with troubled children and at times interfaced with social workers. Also, related to social services, as a volunteer on a regular basis, she has prepared salads that are delivered to a food distribution point for those in need. Perhaps the most valuable is her life experience growing up in Bridgeport and transcending from a disadvantaged community. As noted during our interview with Shirley Jankovich, she's compassionate and big-hearted. She has fire in her belly. She's created and committed. All of these attributes acknowledged, the candidate cannot be seen in isolation, but must be put into a larger context. 3 situations must be considered. The first is the current composition of the Board of Social Services. Second is the absence of the Commissioner of Social Services and the impending search process for a new commissioner. Third is the recommendation of this $75,000 consultant's report. Taking point number 1, the Appointments Committee favors a balance to any board in the town of Greenwich. It favors a variety of skill sets. Currently, the Board of Social Services is out of balance. The current composition of the Board of Social Services is comprised of an industrial engineer with an MBA, a guidance counselor, a special ed teacher, a consultant, a history teacher, and an OBGYN doctor. The dominant question arises, why are we adding another teacher to a board that lacks a member from the core profession of this field of social work? This situation is reminiscent of a problem a few years back when the Greenwich Board of Health had no doctor on it. 2, another problem is the absence of the Commissioner of Social Work, the Department of Social Services. The current commissioner is on administrative leave and I believe is not expected to return. As we know, one of the key responsibility of any board is to hire, evaluate, and fire the commissioner. As the town is on the cusp of searching for a new commissioner, having at least one board member from the core profession would be helpful in the search process in finding a departmental head. The third point is the recommendation of the newly released consultant's report, which once again recommends that the first selectman nominates a board member with professional social work education and experience. The recommendation suggests a board member with direct experience in the social work field, and this is expected to improve board performance. It may also improve another key finding of the report that states that 2/3 of the staff, I repeat, 2/3 of the social work staff feel the current board is doing a mediocre job or worse. In conclusion, the vote of the Appointments Committee was 6 in favor of the nominee and 5 against. The vote is obviously split. The candidate as a standalone easily could have been appointed to the board. She could make a valuable contribution, but the candidate must be seen in a larger context of board composition, of a department missing a commissioner, of a department in flux, of a board losing one co-chair now and the other co-chair saying that she's not returning for another term in March. And the final, and one also has to see this in context of the recommendations of the consultant's report. The best way I can summarize this situation is a good candidate, but nominated at the wrong time.
Thank you. Mr. Richardson with the report of our Health and Human Services Committee.
Mr. Moderator, thank you. I'm afraid we must take a somewhat different point of view, and I will not argue against my own committee's position. As members will recall, the nomination of Ms. Jankowicz was first considered by the Health and Human Services Committee at our June meeting, when the committee acted favorably by a vote of 9 in favor, 1 opposed, and 2 absent, notwithstanding the fact that it was a contentious meeting. The committee again interviewed Ms. Jankowicz on September 13th. In the intervening period, she has attended the meetings of the Board of Social Services, read and familiarized herself with the report of Brody, Weiser, and Burns, as well as the other public documents of the department, and she has followed the reported activities of the board and the department closely. As in our June meeting, Ms. Jankowicz's qualifications to serve on the board were challenged by the delegate from District 8, who is a professional social worker and an employee of the department, who again posed a series of questions suggesting the unsuitability of the nominee for the position. In order, most members are persuaded, because he has so indicated, that his own proposal that new members of the board should be qualified or experienced in social work should be applied. The majority of the committee recognized that Ms. Jankowicz was nominated before the Brody, Weiser, Burns report was written or published, and that the nomination by the Board of Selectmen therefore did not benefit by the recommendations of Brody, Weiser. The majority also felt that this well-educated lady will be a capable member of the board. The committee voted to recommend Ms. Jankowicz's nomination to you by a vote of 10 in favor, 1 opposed, that is the gentleman from District 8, 1 abstaining, the alternate from District 6, who felt she was not sufficiently acquainted with the issues because she was substituting for the regular member. We would again urge her appointment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before proceeding with discussion on this item, I have the vote on item 2, which is the nomination of Tom Baptist to the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency. Those in favor, 133. Opposed, 18. Abstaining, 3. That item is carried. Discussion on item 3, the Shirley Jankowicz nomination. Christine Edwards, District 8.
Good evening to the very stalwart people who have remained, and thank you for participating in our town government. It's hard sometimes to stay late for these meetings, and I appreciate everyone who has stayed and would hope that those leaving would stay. I'd like to also thank Mr. Byrne here with regard to...
Let's not make this any longer than we...
No, I know. I'll take someone else's 3 minutes. This will be quick. I want to bring us right back to our very early introduction to how wonderful the Legal Board and Legislative and Rules Committee is, because of all the lawyers that we have, all the background that they have, how they're really able to delve into the need that we have for legislative and rules. We need the lawyers. Notwithstanding Mr. Richardson's comment that the latest report, Brody's report, specifies a social worker for the board, I want to bring us back to the Cornerstone report, for which we paid, I think, again about $50,000, which specified that we really needed a social worker on the board. It's wonderful to have school teachers. We all have volunteer positions. If I ask people who's fed the homeless, who's made soup kitchens, who's done this, many people here will raise their hands. But we're not professional social workers who know case studies, who know how to deal with the day-to-day background. There are many people who could be brought forward to this, and I just would like to have you vote no on this, specifically to urge that Jim Lash, as our selectman, please follow 2 reports, one for $50,000, one for $75,000, both requesting us to have a vote for a social worker who knows what social work is, a master's level person, because I think that just like with legislative and rules, we've got to have at least some people who know what they're doing on these boards in terms of that very, very board itself and their need to do. Just like we want people that we've just voted on, Tom Baptist, who has a background in knowing and understanding issues of planning, zoning, land use, etc. If we're going to be competent and we're going to reflect the needs that the town has, we need to have people who know what they're doing on the boards. And not that she may not be a wonderful person and very eager to serve and do something good. I think we have to give a signal here to our very legislative government that we are the RTM, and the RTM really needs to take a stand to make sure that all of this money that we're spending to improve one of the areas that was been seen to be weak in the town is weak because we don't have the proper people on the board. So I urge you to reject the candidate in favor of our first selectman and the appointments committee and the appointments suggested committee. The people who work to bring people forward will bring somebody who's suitable and has a background. And I urge you to take the responsibility that we have just to put lawyers on legislative rules, people who know inland wetland, who know zoning in the appropriate places. Let's do this also for the social services department that we have. Thank you.
Lucy Krasner, District 5.
Thank you. Oops, excuse me. And I have this if anyone would like.
As you know, I'm really always very brief, but I did want to point out, first of all, I do think that Christine Edwards said a lot of what I would have said. To honor that report, I think, is critical, and just because this nomination was done before the report came out does not mean we should vote in favor of the nominee. Now, I was at both meetings of the Appointments Committee where we met with Shirley Jankowicz, and I am really not convinced that she is the right person for this job at all. She may have been a wonderful art teacher for many, many, many years, but I really don't feel she has the professional capabilities for this town board that is responding to the Department of Social Services needs. And I think it's really urgent that we find somebody who is correct for this position and vote against this nominee.
Further discussion on item 3. Nick Edwards, District 8.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. When we had an industrial engineer nominated for the Board of Social Services, I got up and made the impassioned argument that we really needed some people, at least one or two, who knew something about the field and about the town's social service needs. I didn't charge you anything for that. That was free. I lost. I got 50 people or so who saw that there was some merit to the idea, so small victory. Now, we've paid $75,000, again, to come up with a very thorough investigation of what the needs are. If you haven't read it, it's very quick reading, but the summaries are very devastating. The department has been described as culturally and functionally broken. So how do we fix this? First, we have to understand what are we doing, and I don't feel an art teacher, though being a good person, probably would be really great at the Boys and Girls Club, working with the kids in direct service, but this involves thinking for the future, being able to evaluate what kind of commissioner does this town really want and require, and really what's the future of social services? Should we downscale it? Should we keep it as a case management organization with highly qualified professionals? You know, how do we want to service roughly 7,000 people in our town out of 61,000 who are, whether we like it or not, are at or below 200% of poverty? They have nobody for their advocates. We're it, the people in the department. We help them in ways that you all probably would go out and hire an attorney, an accountant, and use the other professionals in our society. They don't have that. And who is their voice? I know from colleagues that they'd like to see a person on the board who is actually one of the constituents from one of the housing projects. Let them speak out. Let them really give us the reality of what it's like to live on the other side of Greenwich, the farther side. And it's a very difficult side amidst all the opulence. So I do ask that you consider seriously what is the need, what is our responsibility is to really address the needs of our community, the needs of the boards. And just a few other points. When we were interviewing Ms. Jenkowitz in the Health and Human Service meeting, I asked her very simple questions. What's the responsibility as a board member? And what are your primary responsibilities? Well, she went off in some general way, and it's really to strategic plan for the future and evaluate the commissioner. She said she had read their charter, but it was not clear. I had asked her other things about what you do. She said, well, I'll meet with the social workers and get to know them. Well, she had 3 months to do that. She had an unusual situation to have a lot of time to really take responsibility and get in the department. She didn't even know that she could go to a board meeting until somebody told her that she could do that. So I was really disappointed. Had she shown up in our department, I probably would have been more favorable. So in conclusion, I really feel that we need to let the first selectman know that this is the need. We've spent $75,000, and by the way, we'll probably spend another $75,000. So the question is, who do you want to administer and implement this report?
Susie Anderson, District 8.
I'm the alternate from District 8 to appointments. I rarely vote there, so I sit behind Chris von Kaiserling. But I've tried to learn about the appointments committee over the last 2 years. I've attended most of the meetings, and there's a long process, and the rejection of any candidate who comes before this body is so difficult for all of us that for many years the appointments committee has met and interviewed the candidates long before the deadline for the RTM call. In this way, a candidate, a town resident, and an otherwise well-meaning volunteer could be screened before going through the personal discomfort of public rejection. Postponement usually arises because the candidate had so much difficulty in scheduling that he was unable to appear before one of the committees. That really did not apply here, as this candidate has been given 2 long sessions of interviews, one in the spring and one now, with a long period of time in between. Postponements of candidates otherwise arise when the committee deems that there could be a conflict of interest or there's some difficulty in making a logical link between the person's past experience and the appointment to the board for which they're being considered. That is the case here. We really are not able to see any link between the resume and any past experience to the board that's being appointed, and this is
a very important board and at a very difficult time. We've had this $75,000 consultant study, which has come to us in between this postponement now, but not really been able to be acted upon. I investigated the issue of why she was not interviewed by the Selectmen's new advisory committee, and it seems that she was self-nominated. But my question is this: why would any reasonable person self-nominate themselves to a board when they've never attended one meeting of that body? How could you be serious about your commitment to devote your energy and time to such a cause? Would you not want to see the body in action or have met any of the other board members? I also really feel that we need to consider the different qualifications on members of this board and make sure that it has a breadth of expertise. It does not. And appointing this candidate at this time will not make that possible. I urge you to vote no on this candidate so that we might get a candidate who can be in a position to do what needs to be done to protect social services in this town. We have to hire a new director, and we really need to consider everything that came forth in this consultant study. Thank you.
Mr. Laurie has his hand up. No, Mr. Laurie, I'm actually recognizing Mr. Von Keyserling, who I know is going to tell us things we have not already heard tonight. Okay. Mr. Von Keyserling.
Ladies and gentlemen of the body, this is a very troublesome appointment. If you recall that in June we postponed the appointment of Ms. Jankowicz to September for a rather peculiar reason. The co-chairman of the Board of Social Services had not wished to be reappointed again for a full term because of his job commitments, but that was right in the process of the study that we're going through for social services. It was thought by my appointments committee originally that we suggested to you, and you concurred, that we postpone this appointment of Ms. Jankowicz until September so that Mr. Booth could continue to serve as one does until replaced through the period of that study and the receipt of their report and to act on the report. Such has been the case. That is done. So the reason for that postponement is finished. Now, as you said, the report that came out has been brought up by my able colleagues from District 7. And I want to say that Susie Anderson has been a very strong and helpful alternate on the Appointments Committee with me. She has been working with me, has attended fully, and she often consults with me on various appointments and votes, of which I've been very appreciative in her points of view. On this we differ, but that's the horse race. The report says you need expert skill on the board. You need somebody who has a deep knowledge of social services, not necessarily a degree in social services, but a deep experience in it. It is clear that the candidate's experience is not a formal experience in the sense that we could see on a resume. However, if you look into the service of this person's lifelong career, it has all been social services oriented. Coming from a background which has been receipt of the social services system and well aware of it, and having grown up by her own bootstraps through going to college on scholarships and everything and come to teach, she has used her teaching and art as a social tool to help children, especially children who live in the project and stuff, to become socialized and to become effective. She has been deeply aware of these needs and has used it on her own. Now, that doesn't make her an expert, it doesn't make her a professional, particularly in that field, but you should know that this has been a lifelong commitment on her part. Number two, the report says, in effect, that the other 6 members of the Board of Social Services do not have this qualification. That's why we need somebody like this. Well, we voted for all those other 6 people, and they were all right. Is now one time when Jesus comes down and tells us the truth, and now we change our minds? Why now? I wonder about this. Remember, the other 6 were nominated by this administration. And the Second Selectman told us in our interview with Mrs. Jankowicz, when our chairman pressed very strongly about the system being broken, we need somebody with his background and expertise, he said that the board was well aware that the system was broken, and they already moved long before this to repair what they thought was a problem by removing the chairman, Ms. Gilhooly, and transferring the vice chairman, Ms. Settelmeyer, out of that board. By the way, replacing her with two people who apparently are not qualified, if you read the report or believe that. So why, if this is what the Board of Selectmen has been doing, and obviously they're doing it with forethought and planning, this is not a foolish group of people, they know what they're doing as they've exhibited, why would you believe that by turning down Mrs. Jankowicz, which is the plan, you turn down Mrs. Jankowicz so that the Board of Selectmen may send us a nomination with a qualified person who has a deep, heavy background in social service, who will save the day by reforming the whole board and the department? Why did they not do that before when they were aware of the program, when they removed two strong people, Ms. Gahuli and Ms. Settelmeyer, who had deep experience and ability in the field? Why would you expect them, if we send away Mrs. Jankowicz, to send us this savior of expertise? I think that is at best naive. I will report to you what was reported to us, that you remember that Mrs. Jankowicz is to replace Mr. Booth as a co-chair. The other co-chair, Ms. Geismer, has been reported to our committee that same night that she does not want to be reappointed next spring. She doesn't want another term. She's vacating. That leaves a very big opening this spring where there's time to really put the pressure on the search for that qualified person. Our kind chairman of District 6 has herself located or identified two very good potential candidates for this job with a deep background of the kind that would be required. But we need to bring them forward and vet them through the process. So I would put to you that to punish Ms. Jankowicz, who has been patient and gracious enough to allow and not object to her being postponed to September so that we can let Mr. Booth finish out something that he had to do, and now reward her for that by saying, I'm sorry, we changed our minds, would be a bit cruel and not only useful. I like this woman. She's got fire in her belly. She's the kind of person who has a commitment to the mission of social services. She will fight for those people, and I don't care who goes on that board. I care about the people that need to be served. I want them served. I want them served well. I need somebody on that board who cares about them deeply, and this lady does. Please vote for her.
Further discussion on item 3. Mr. Boutel, District 8, for what purpose do you rise? The chair of the Appointments Committee. Well, I think we're in the land of speculation now, but Ms. Jenkins, do you care to explain what Mr. von Keisling was referring to without getting into?
Yeah, basically there are two people that have social work degrees that have submitted resumes to me. I'm not the nominating body. What I traditionally do is turn it over to the Board of Selectmen and the Selectmen's Nominating Committee.
Further discussion on item 3? Dr. Carl Carlson, District 1. Be followed by Mr. Laurie.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members of the RTM, I'm a member of the Appointments Committee from District 1. 10 days ago, when Mrs. Jankowicz came before us, the following question was asked of her: what is the purpose of social services? I most carefully wrote down her response. She said, taking care of people who cannot take care of themselves. I thought that very appropriate and very correct. There is a great deal of humanity in this lady, and now there's a considerable enthusiasm in her for doing this job. I think we should take the risk with her, and we should approve her through tonight. This board is troubled, yes, and there will be changes on this board. Essentially, the board has fallen down, and we've got to rebuild this board. And the beginning is often with the humanity in people, and from there you build on with the professional service people. I recommend Mrs. Jankowicz to you as a fit and proper person to go on this board.
Roger Laurie, District 7. All right. The motion for the previous question is a motion to cut off debate. Not debatable and requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of immediately proceeding to vote on item 3, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Item number 3, and proceed to poll your delegation. Since that is the last item on our agenda, we will await the results of that vote before proceeding to adjourn. We have the result of the vote on item 3, the nomination of Shirley Jankowicz to be a member of the Board of Social Services. Those in favor, 72. Opposed, 63. Abstaining, 5. That item has carried. Thank you very much for coming. There being no further business to come before us, and absent objection, this meeting is now adjourned.